The following is brought to you by the PLD Projects Network. It's me. It's me. It's PLD. PLD. PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
I saw numbers. It's like seeing dead people. It's like seeing dead people. Yeah, I saw numbers. It's very similar to that that little like Haley Joel Osment kid.
It's been a long time since we saw the numbers.
Yeah, I know. Welcome back, I guess, or something.
Welcome back. We finished the Conjuring franchise. We're moving on to the next actual season, I guess, almost you would say, of Two Mediocre White Dudes. A 3-episode season this time, thanks to Brandon Buckingham, one of our lovely patrons at PLD Projects, who suggested doing Lord of the Rings trilogy. Actually, just kind of initially said Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth, but he kind of said in a private message, you don't have to do the Hobbit stuff. I just want to hear you talk about the Lord of the Rings. And because we have a time constraint, because we want to get to our next one after that, we are deciding to just go with it. We'll do the Lord of the Rings trilogy. We might come back and do the Hobbit trilogy at some point, because we kind of like them more than most. But for the next 3 episodes, Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson's trilogy, the extended edition. How psyched were you to hear that we were going to do this?
I don't know if Buck knows this, but I'm a very busy person, and you're a very busy person, and he chose 4-hour each long movies to be like, this is what you're going to have to deal with now. And I was like, I don't know if I'm really in the mood for that right now, man. No, I'm kidding. I'm excited because I really like these movies, man. And it's interesting because we were talking about it before we came on here. Like, Fellowship is such a specific thing in, like, the beginning of a sea change for blockbusters and filmmaking from the 2000s on, because the first movie made almost $900 million in a time when movies didn't make that much money. Really, like, yeah, like Titanic, $1 billion was a thing that you barely like even thought about.
Right.
Now we see it a lot more frequently, but this one was such a weird sea change because everything about this project sounded doomed from the start in a way. They had casting issues at the gate. They had started shooting. They had to recast Aragorn. A bunch of stuff like that had happened. They were doing all 3 movies at one time, which was pretty much unheard of. But like New Line was just going to roll the dice and see what happened. They were doing it on a director who he had made movies, but like Peter Jackson wasn't a known name or like a known quantity to the world. And you kind of filled the movie with a bunch of actors that were recognizable, but like they're not going to sell a movie.
Right,
so your hope here is
stars there.
Right. There's no A-list movie star other than maybe Ian McKellen, and even then he's much more of like a niche cult type icon than he is like.
He'd be the supporting actor, the very talented supporting actor that would win an Academy Award for supporting acting, but not sell tickets that way.
Look, man, they fucking threw one of the Goonies into this movie. Like, they weren't putting anyone in here that was, like, blowing people's minds to get them to come in. They just cast it and wanted characters to be characters and actors to be those characters. And it's just so fascinating because as we get into it and we're talking about it, like, I think more and more Fellowship is actually my favorite of the 3.
It's interesting you said that. First of all, I just want to point out real quick what you said earlier on the 4-hour movie thing. Do you realize that I think the trilogy here probably equals the same amount of movie time that the whole Conjuring franchise probably took up? That's what I'm thinking. But regardless, I do agree with you that honestly, this is one of my. I go back and forth between which movie is my favorite in the trilogy. First of all, because they are also. It really is one of the things I have to say about this entire trilogy. Is it unlike any other film trilogy series, whatever you want to call it, this really feels like one long movie. There is no break in tone. There is no break in like visuals. There is no break in like anything. This really just feels like we had a 12-plus hour movie and we just kind of sliced it into 3 sections. Because that's how it feels. So I say I love Return of the King. It has some of my favorite moments. The Two Towers might have my favorite battle. This one, though, is probably the most accurate representation of the novel than any of the other ones. Like, this is almost legitimately just from the page, pretty much. It's
except don't
done.
get the Tom Bombadil fans upset because you saying that, and then they're gonna be real upset because you're like, you say that, but there was no Tom Bombadil.
That is the exception to the rule. And actually, I had an idea, but I actually wanted to throw a game out there at you real quick. Here's my game. Who would you have cast as Tom Bombadil if you had done that, added the Tom Bombadil section? Because I have one in mind.
I mean, look, I have a very specific, obvious answer for everyone here. Tom Baker should have been Tom Bombadil.
Tom Baker would be good. That's true. I thought you were going to go Bruce Campbell, and that would have been.
No, I'm going straight up. There's a lot of Doctor Who alum in the Middle Earth saga. I feel like Tom Baker needs his due. Like, we got Sylvester McCoy in here. I mean, you could have put Colin Baker in. He kind of looks like. I could see that too. He's good at playing angry.
Yeah, that's true. Interesting angles. I like that. I had a different one, and surprisingly, everybody, it's not Ed Harris. But
I'm shocked right now. Actually, this is my shocked face.
Not Ed Harris. I'm going to go to Robin Williams.
I mean, I wouldn't have hated that, to be honest with you.
The quirkiness, but yet the anger if he needed to be. Like, I feel like he's got the dark side to him. But he had
That's why I went Tom Baker, because to me, Baker is like the epitome of everything of, like, he might be one of the quirkiest people to play the Doctor. And he did it for so long, but there's always like that boiling anger underneath that you're just waiting to see snap. So I really, really felt like that could be his chance. We really missed out. You know what, Peter Jackson? Get a time machine.
Back.
Call me. Let's go back.
Let's pull a Lucas and actually recut a new scene for the extended edition.
Yeah.
We can de-age everybody, right?
Tom Baker as Tom Bombadil. I don't see any reason that this can't happen.
Fair enough. I do also want to apologize to Richard R. Jarvie. Richard R. Jarvie did say beforehand that he loves our pre-movie banter, which we actually didn't do this time. Kind of got right into it.
Hey, why are you saying that? You say that now. It doesn't mean we can't do it. I can derail this in a second.
We actually haven't got into the full movie yet. It's actually been outside the movie still, huh? And you know what? You did mention Doctor Who. We got some big news today from Doctor Who.
We did get Doctor Who news. I'm still trying to process this because this spoiler alert for the kids at home. We normally record this at night, but I had to tell PLD that Monday nights are a no-go for me right now because I like to go to see bad B movies over at the Loft Cinema down here in Tucson. Support your local indie theaters. They always do a thing called Mondo Mondays, and I'm seeing The Pit tonight, and I was not going to miss the B movie Canadian classic The Pit on the big screen. So we're doing this in the middle of the day.
There's a lot to unpack that sentence first of all. I just want to say the B movie Canadian classic. That's that's interesting unpacking. But you said what you said, and you're going to stand by it.
I said what I said, and there's a talking evil demonic bear in it. So everything I said is accurate to the situation.
Okay.
Into the pit. Come on, it's The Pit. Everyone likes The Pit. Ben Bateman's like, oh god, there's going to be a 5-point question about The Pit one day.
I've held him off on the Grizzly 2 questions, so I don't know, but I don't know how long I can hold him off forever. So Ben, you better get studying on your Canadian classic B-list films. There's a showdown slice waiting to happen. Actually,
honestly,
there's a wild card
slice. Showdown slices. Yeah. I think there's something to work with here, especially the Canadian ones. Class of 1984. Just saying. Michael J. Fox is in that one.
That's true. Icon.
Roddy McDowell. I mean, come on. There's all sorts of really cool people in that movie. That's beside the point.
Right.
But because of that, we're in the middle of the news cycle day. So we have not been up very long, and news is just like coming out over and over and over again. And the one that was actually there's a couple of weird ones, but this one was the weirdest. Neil Patrick Harris is in the Doctor Who 60th anniversary special.
What?
Yeah. I was waiting for it to be legend, and then I know that you're lactose intolerant, but the next word is dairy. But I was just like, my God, Neil Patrick Harris in Doctor Who?
And yet it makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
To me. I feel it.
It's incredible.
I'm impressed. Russell T Davies is doing a wonderful job in like slowly rolling out this little news bits for the public as we get closer and closer to the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. So much so, it's kind of funny that like it really is overwhelming and well overcasting Jodie's final performances. No one's even talking about Jodie's final performances now. It's all moving ahead. They're all looking straight ahead. They're going 100 miles an hour on it. But I'm in for it. I'm all in for it.
It's funny you say that, too, because ultimately Davies kept saying how he didn't want to overshadow Jodie's thing, but the truth is they had to start filming. They had to do a lot of what they're doing, and BBC is desperate to make people actually give a shit about Doctor Who right now, because there's no real secret that many fans got lost over the last 3 seasons, and we've said it here before. It has nothing to do with Jodie. I loved her in the role. I hated the writing.
Yes. Chris Chibnall, we're not a fan of Chris Chibnall on Two Mediocre White Dudes. He is a less than mediocre white dude when it comes to Doctor Who.
He's the Colin Trevorrow of the Doctor Who universe. Take that for what you will. I'm just saying, dude. And I say that as someone who liked Dominion.
You are one of the...
I'm not saying Dominion's
you are the one.
Good.
You are the one. You are the one, I think, actually. It might be...
I mean, I'm also the one person who has Fallen Kingdom as the best sequel in the franchise. So there's that.
Yeah, you probably are the one person on that as well. I mean, actually, I will admit that I watched it again recently, and I liked it a lot more the second time. Probably through your influence, honestly. It's probably through your influence. But
it's almost like sometimes I know what I'm talking about, and then when you like go in with those new, fresh eyes, you're like, man, that's actually really interesting. Look at how interesting and true that was. PJ's a genius. And I know that you don't want to say that out loud because you're afraid of my ego, but it's true.
Genius is not the word I would use. Insanity
Savant?
might be. No. Insanity. Complete.
Bad man with a box.
Bad man. That I'll go with. That I will definitely go with.
Yeah. I am definitely a madman with a box. Actually, I want to talk about this real quick. I'm fascinated right now by Top Gun Maverick, and not only its continual existence of being, but what the fuck, man? This movie is doing incredible at the box office. What the hell happened here?
Let's face it, everybody wanted to see the new Ed Harris movie. They were just waiting, and they're chomping the bit to see the new Ed Harris movie, and it's come to fruition. I see nothing wrong with it. I see that it's actually Ed getting his due finally. He's made a movie that's going to be over $1 billion. It's the way it should be.
I can't mute him, guys. I would if I could. I'm sorry. I have no power here.
Story of your life, EJ. Story of your life. But in truth, but all jocularity aside, I think it's a great thing. It is definitely a lightning in a bottle kind of situation. Who would have thought that after 30 plus years of that the sequel could come and not only be successful, not only be something that is not like, there's no mixed feelings about this. Like The Force Awakens came, there's some mixed feelings, overall good. Jurassic World, same type of thing. These legacy sequels that are 30 years later, it's like, this is almost universally loved. Not only universally loved, but I would say that the majority of people would argue that it's better than the original film.
I fall in that camp.
I fall in that camp as well. I think it's amazing how it's part of the reason why it's so successful is that it relies just enough on the original film to heartstrings a little bit, but it works very well, completely well. And I don't know how it was I don't know how it was such a perfect storm like this, but I'm glad it is, and I'm glad that Tom Cruise got what he wanted, got on the big screen, because this definitively is one of those movies that seeing on the big screen is so much more valuable than seeing it on your iPhone or seeing it at home, really.
No, 100%. And you know what I was thinking about is that there's only one other legacy sequel, quote unquote, if you could compare it to, I think. And that movie is another 80s film. Someone is not liking my comparison, apparently.
I guess that.
But Creed 2. Because Creed 2 takes Rocky IV's whole being I don't know what's going on with you, and I need you to stop. All right?
This is our animal episode at this point. Our animals are getting all involved.
Apparently.
This is what happens when we do it in the afternoon, I guess.
Yeah, apparently they get all feisty and weird. And so I apologize for the barking. I have my office door closed, and I'm sure the cats are on the other side bothering Dipper. But Rocky 4 similarly was like a very 80s film. It captures like a very specific moment in time. It's a little goofy, but people love it. It's like very revered within the community of people who love Rocky. It's just pretty much well known as like a really great sports film from the 80s. Mm-hmm. Like it's very beloved, but it's very goofy and it's kind of like not that serious. Of course, Stallone has now changed that and like re-edited the movie to be more in the vein of Rocky 1 and 2.
I don't know if you've heard that, but that was the sound of four eyes rolling and dropping on the floor. But go ahead, continue.
Correct. That's the correct take. I could get into the Rocky 4 thing. I'm not going to today, but I have my own feelings on it. But Rocky 4 to Creed 2, Creed 2 treats the fourth one like it's serious. Like, it treats the history of it like it's serious. It takes everything about this, like, goofy 80s movie and makes it a serious character study. Right. And that's what Maverick did. But really Maverick's not just doing that with the first movie, it's also doing it with Cruise's career.
Yeah.
And that's 100%. The fascinating thing.
And it's funny that there's not really a whole lot of difference between, like, say, Pete Mitchell and, say, Ethan Hunt or any number of Tom Cruise's characters. Tom Cruise is one of those guys who definitely coasts on movie star name. He plays Tom Cruise most of the time. But it works, and it works so well in this case. But that's a fascinating take to Rocky. By the way, the Rocky thing you got going on here, I think that's definitely a franchise we're going to have to do at some point because that just makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I'm never going to say no to that, number one.
100%. You'd have to watch both Rocky 4 and Rocky vs. Drago, though, I think. We'd have to do both of them.
I think we have to. I think you have to. Because there's a lot to break down on the comparisons of the two versions of those movies. I'll tell you guys right now, like I just recently rewatched the entire Rocky franchise, and I did it in the attempt of trying to make Rocky versus Drago fit better in my mind. And so I watched it over Rocky 4 in the watch through, and I liked it better that way than I had watching it singularly by itself. But this was a conversation that I had with Tim Franco about this, was that I think at the end of the day, my problem is that no matter how I watch it, like Rocky 4 is the thing that lives in my head, like rent free, and it always has and it always will. So to me, Rocky 4 is like such a specific thing that any version that tries to change that immediately feels suspect and weird, and I'm never going to be fully able to wrap my head around it. And I think that Stallone trying to take out all the goofy nature of it and trying to change it to be like a more serious version of it kind of misses the point.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only way it worked well for me, it worked better for me one time. I watched it twice. The first time I watched it out of nowhere, and I hated it. I was like, this is not good. Then I decided to watch it as a twofer. I watched Rocky vs. Drago and right into Creed 2. And because it does match the tone a little better, like I appreciate it a little bit more, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I that's kind of where I was during the rewatch, because I was texting you while I was doing it, and I was like, actually, it was both times, because I remember the first time I watched it, you had already seen it, and you were like, just kind of buckle up. You're not going to be ready for it. And I was texting you, like, heated. I was like, wait, what the fuck? Like, we knew the robot was gone, but, like, you cut your child. Like, the kid is barely in the picture.
Right, at all. Hardly at all.
At all. Like, like,
and even that scene's cut down.
Well, then he adds a scene in with Robert that's, like, just kind of weird.
Right.
It's like the one scene he's in the movie, and it's just like this odd. I'm going down the rabbit hole. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole.
This is not the Rocky 4 episode.
My point is that Rocky versus Drago is a thing that didn't need to exist. But I wanted to say, so in the Top Gun of all of this, what is it that you think is like pushing people out? Like, this movie's going to maybe actually make $1 billion, way more than they ever anticipated it making.
Well, I think part of it is, and by the way, you're welcome, Jarvie. I think part of this is that it actually served nostalgia in a good way, like better than attempts to serve nostalgia. A lot of times people attempt to serve nostalgia by adding a lot of like fan servicey type moments, things like that, things that might have not make sense just to kind of get the callback. Top Gun Maverick does not do that. It does have fan servicing moments, but they're all in service to the story, and they're all naturally done for the most part. The only one that felt at all forced at all to me was the Great Balls of Fire sequence because of the age of the song, the age of the people doing it, and everything else. I get that his son his son was there when his father did it, that kind of thing. That one felt maybe a little bit forced, but overall, even that, if that's your worst forced moment, then you did a good job.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost impressive how much this movie actually really leaned in on itself and like the history of it and treated it with such reverence, but also so human, and being like, we were young, we were children, we were stupid, and we were young, and I gotta give them all the credit in the world for using Penny the way they do, and this idea that in Top Gun everyone kept worrying about whether or not we were going to ever see the fling again, and like why it was so important to bring what's her name back, whose name I'm blanking on. I apologize.
Kelly McGillis.
Yes, thank you, Kelly McGillis. Everyone was like, well, you can't do it without Kelly McGillis, and their brilliant workaround was actually he loved someone long before he loved Kelly McGillis's character, and they've just kind of been star-crossed lovers at the wrong time every time until now.
Right.
And I kind of dug that.
Me too. Me too.
Like,
they bring back a name, just a passing name from the movie, and then gave it depth. And that just, like, it made all the sense in the world to do that. And not in a Star Warsian, like, we got to tell this backstory of every single character we meet. Every single character needs a toy. It just was a passing name, gave that name to somebody else, and gave her the backstory that they had a past. And that's all you needed to build on for a future. We don't go into the past very much, just enough to kind of, like, lay some groundwork. Now she's a real living, breathing character, just like everyone else in the universe. So well done. It's what they did with that film. And what they did, as this is another reason why they just knew how to treat the old property and make it new again for us, and continued the story in a way. That's the best thing. They continued the story that was laid down. The whole Iceman of it all, brilliantly done, especially given the circumstances surrounding Iceman and everything else. I mean, I don't want to go into too many spoilery details yet. We'll do that for our Top Gun episode or some point. We're doing all these.
We just keep adding on episodes over here,
and I'm here for it. I don't know what we do. Maybe just the Tom Cruise a thon of some kind. I don't know. We could do something like that at some point. I don't know. We just like to take an actor and take some of the best, biggest, well-known movies or whatever. But I digress. I do think that it's very successful for those reasons, but it also has Tom Cruise at the top of his game. Tom Cruise has become an action star beyond what everyone ever even thought. I mean, he does all the stunts, obvious, for Mission Impossibles. Now he's doing that and taking that to Top Gun. I don't know. Like, I don't remember looking into it how much of this stunts he did back for Top Gun, but it feels like he's doing more now. I mean, he actually taught the other pilots how to fly for the movie. That makes it almost all more impressive. You're going, wow, this is actually stuff happening. This isn't like movie magic. This is Tom Cruise just being Tom Cruise.
Well, not just that. I mean, I thought it was like a much more impressive, and this is not a dig at Tony Scott. It's just look how much time has changed. Right. The aerial sequences in this are ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Like incredible stuff. Again, that's not to dig at Tony Scott. I mean,
not at all.
Tony Scott's one of my favorite filmmakers. But we've come so far, and the stuff you could do, it was just like, wow, 36 years later, it's almost remarkable. And this is like one of the longest waits, years later type legacy sequels. Kaczynski now has 2 under his belt that I think are 2 of the best of the genre, 2 of the best of this type of thing, because Tron Legacy, for all intents and purposes, like it, I love that movie, and I know that there's some fair criticisms towards it, and like the de-aging Jeff Bridges thing is a little weird because it was way early for its time, but it took a swing. But Tron Legacy similarly was a movie that I felt like took something from the 80s and updated it for a modern audience while telling the story that we had wanted to see since Tron.
Right.
And I think that he really understands this idea of nostalgia and storytelling going hand in hand. Because I see a lot of people who complain that nostalgia is inherently like a bad thing. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Nostalgia for the sake of nostalgia can be a bad thing, but nostalgia storytelling is not, depending on how you do it. Like James Mangold doing Indiana Jones, right? he's doing that because Indiana Jones probably inspired him in his career. If you've seen his movies, there's a very clear indication to me that the Amblin Spielberg type of filmmaking was a thing that influenced him. So he's going to infuse whatever his Indiana Jones 5 is with nostalgia, but he's also doing it because he felt like he had a story to tell.
Right, exactly. And that's what it is. And I like you said it best, nostalgia storytelling is great because, quite frankly, that's the best stories we ever get. A lot of the best stories we ever got come from stuff that we know from our childhood or things that, I mean, even George Lucas made Star Wars with the intention of doing serials and stuff that he loved growing up and that kind of thing. It's all nostalgia for him. And nostalgia done well, you take the best stuff of your favorite time period and you bring it up and update it a bit. And that's what makes it work. And it's obviously a formula it's tough to get sometimes. You sometimes can go a little heavy on nostalgia, and that's what makes it overdone and takes you out of the film. But done right makes you bring this full circle, makes it feel like one continuous story, like Lord of the Rings does.
Right. And I mean, look, the truth is also, you said something really brilliant there. The George Lucas of it, right? You did. No, really, though. You brought up the George Lucas of it. I hate to give you the credit, but you did. The George Lucas of it with trying to recreate, like, the Flash Gordon serials and things like that, that's nostalgia. But also, nostalgia goes a different way. George Lucas making American Graffiti was his nostalgic ode to his time growing up in Modesto. Like, that... Yeah. But that movie... coming out in the 70s about the 50s was a nostalgic coming-of-age film about growing up. But you were doing it 20 years later, looking back at a different time period.
Right.
And that is nostalgic storytelling. It's not nostalgia in the way that people think about it, but it is. Stand By Me, similarly. Nostalgia, storytelling. The Sandlot, the same thing. Nostalgic storytelling. The Outsiders, nostalgic storytelling. People get caught up in the idea that nostalgia storytelling only comes from, like, franchise things. That's not the case. Period pieces. Period pieces, to an extent, are nostalgic storytelling. Because you're looking back through rose-tinted glasses at a time period that either some people remember and or you're trying to transport them back to a time that they wish they could visit.
Right. Either way. And Top Gun Maverick does exactly that. And like I said, I want to just point out, I didn't want to gloss over it. You said, nothing against Tony Scott. Obviously, Tony Scott, one of our favorite filmmakers, my favorite filmmakers as well.
Yeah.
Tony Scott wasn't even quite Tony Scott then. This was like his first big movie. He was still developing quite a bit, so there's definitely nothing against Tony Scott. This is a great first step into Tony Scotthood. Gets a little more as it goes along anyway. So I have no problem saying that Tony Scott wasn't quite where he was going to be for the rest of his career at this moment. So they took the best of the Tony Scott stuff from 1986 and updated it now for 2022 or whatever it is.
It's so funny you say that, too, because you're 100% right. Tony Scott's career is so fascinating out the gate because he does Beverly Hills Cop 2, this, and Days of Thunder. And then it's like right after that, he kind of goes into Crimson Tide, and Crimson Tide is like the peak of Tony Scott becoming Tony Scott.
I think that's the first real, true Tony Scott movie right there is Crimson Tide. Absolutely.
Yeah.
He goes and makes a couple movies that are quite similar, but like it's right in the same vein, but that's the one that starts it all off.
Yeah, I think so. Because like there's flourishes in Beverly Hills Cop and Top Gun and Days of Thunder. And I actually think Days of Thunder is kind of the better Top Gun movie that Tony Scott and Tom Cruise made of the two. Like that one just happens to be Top Gun with race cars.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing, but it's got the same sort of like, hotshot guy who's young and kind of a type thing for people. Right. At the same time, it's got a little bit of the more Tony Scott side to it. It's a little bit more fun. It's a little bit more sexy. I don't know. I just really, really like it.
With Tom Cruise. In both films, of course, obviously, too.
Yeah.
But I will say I prefer Top Gun over Days of Thunder, but I think you are right in that Days of Thunder ends up being more Tony Scott, if that makes sense.
I think that's 100% where I'm at.
I also want to throw this out there just because I don't want any Tony Scott fans to think we're so uncultured ever. Obviously, he had the hunger before Top Gun. Also, the 1983 really non-Tony Scott film, a Tony Scott movie about vampires with David Bowie, Susan Sarandon, and all that. But then Top Gun, then Beverly Hills Cop 2 right around that same time. Beverly Hills Cop 2 is 87. But yeah, we'll get into top. We're going to get into Tony. We're going to have to do a Tony Scott at some point. That's what I think as well, because there's so many great films that I'd love to cover on this. It almost feels like we should do maybe, as instead of a franchise, we should do the Tony Scott and Denzel.
I mean, look, there's some really good stuff there with the two of them.
Let's treat that as a franchise. We'll treat that as a franchise. I'd be all for that.
Yeah. There's just so many ways to look at it, and goddamn, man.
Yes.
What a filmography.
So good.
Yeah, but you know what else is so good? Sorry, Jarvie, this episode's going to be way too long, so we actually have to get on track. But we're going to talk about Fellowship of the Ring today.
We are going to talk about Fellowship of the Ring today. I'm so excited to talk about it. Here we are. We're talking about everything else, but this is the episode. We are now about half an hour in. We're talking about the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship edition, the Fellowship of the Ring, the extended edition, because we don't watch anything else. At least we don't. I mean, if we were forced to, I guess we would.
I don't think that there's any other version that exists. There's not. Right. There's just no other version of these movies that exist other than the extended versions.
So it's one of those things that some people are like, oh my God, it's 3.5 hours. But you try to take it out, and I watched the theatrical version once after the extended. I'm kind of like, it's missing something, man. It's just missing something.
I can't. I've tried to go back and watch the theatricals, and I can't. They just don't hit the same way,
right,
as the extended versions, and that's not a dig at it, but that just tells you how great the theatricals already were. That the extended versions make them almost feel like moot.
Well,
I would never go back.
Also, because it's a testament to how amazing this world feels, that these don't feel like unnecessary, or they don't feel like the extended. It's kind of like, oh, why? You want to be more in this world. The longer you're in this world, the better.
Yeah.
So
because Jackson gets it. That's the reason. Jackson gets it. And it's a thing that I think about a lot when it comes to these movies, is that he just made a really lived-in, remarkable, real version of Middle Earth.
I will say it right here, as a huge Star Wars fan that I am. You know this. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. That's my saga. This is the first trilogy that I was like, this is made with the same love and care, and feels like it's going to have that kind of impact. And it did, really. You can talk about this with the Star Wars trilogy, and it holds up.
I agree. And it's fascinating that you look at it that way, because I think similarly, for an entire generation, this is their Star Wars. Mm-hmm. For an entire generation of kids who didn't grow up with the original trilogy in the same way, or didn't respond to the prequel trilogy in the same way. Mm-hmm. This was their version of going into something and being so enamored with the world, because the truth is that Lord of the Rings felt like a niche thing that no one could get off the ground for the longest time. The fact that Peter Jackson finally made it happen and got someone to let him do 3 movies is insanity, because there was fights. There was a lot of fights about doing it as 2 movies instead, or even not filming them all at one time and only doing one and seeing what happens. And I'm glad that wasn't the case. And it's actually the thing.
I was going to say, nailed it, and hammer on the nail for me, because that was the thing. This is I want to say this is the textbook case of why studios should put their faith in a director who's talented, knows what he's doing, and make epic films and say, all right, we're going to commit to doing a trilogy of movies. That doesn't happen very often because of the money. And I get why it doesn't happen, because it's a big gamble. But when it's successful, it makes you look like geniuses. When it's not, it does fuck you up. You're not going to lie. But this was something that this is the perfect storm of everything happened. We had the people at the studio who eventually trusted him. We had Peter Jackson and auteur who knew what he was doing. And everybody who's working on this loved the franchise so well. We had a well-loved franchise in the beginning. Just the novels are well-loved, obviously. And then everybody involved, from the production crew, the painters, the art, Alan Lee, Philip, who did the script of them, I'm sorry, I forget her name. Philip Boyan, Fran Walsh, obviously Peter Jackson's wife.
Yeah.
They just all were just so solid. Howard Shore, they all loved the franchise so much, being involved with it, that they gave their all. It really became like a family. I don't know if anyone. I'll say it now, real quick. I mentioned this yesterday on our PLD Projects Hangout that we do monthly. This was one of some of the best behind the scenes footage and documentaries and stuff, extra material you can get in a movie. If you ever like anything to do with that, this is the one. Because this and Star Wars, by the way, but like the commentaries, the documentaries, the behind the scenes are just as good as the movie itself. You make you feel like a family member.
I mean, it's not even just these ones too. Even the Hobbit movies, for all their problems, the Hobbits have incredible behind-the-scenes documentaries that are strikingly honest, which is always surprising to me when I go back and rewatch them. Like Peter Jackson's shutting down the set for the day and realizing he was in over his head coming in because, remember, he was not supposed to make those movies, and he was brought on after the fact.
Maybe actually appreciate the Hobbit trilogy even more when I watched that stuff. I understood what he went through. I'm like, okay, all right, I'll give it a pass here and there. But we're going to talk about that now. We're going to go into this one, which is universally acclaimed. This is probably one of the most universally acclaimed movies I've ever heard. I don't know anybody.
Real quick, before we jump into that, I wanted to your once again another brilliant point. This is happening too frequently. This is what I continue to curse Legendary for. Dune should have been shot all the way through and released a year apart, the same way that they did with this. And I think that it's a massive mistake that they're waiting 2 years between movies. I think you should have you could wait for Dune Messiah, and that's fine. You need to almost, because Dune Messiah, there's a bigger time gap between it. But if you're intent on telling the Dune story and ending it where you did, the next movie should have been imminent on the heels of the first.
100%. And it's the same situation. It is the same situation. You have a much loved source material that people absolutely love in sci-fi. This is like Dune was like to sci-fi what Lord of the Rings was to fantasy, quite frankly. And you had a director with the pedigree of Denis Villeneuve, who just doesn't make a bad movie, committing to this, knowing what you could do. This was a fucking no-brainer. You film it back-to-back. You have back-to-back years. You don't give it time for people to forget. You don't give time for people to for things to because the longer you wait, the longer you put time in between, things don't quite match up just as perfect as they would.
Yeah, and that's kind of my fear for the next Dune, because if they had the chance to do everything at one time, I think it would ultimately feel a little more cohesive. I'm sure it'll be fine, but it's a frustration that I felt for a bit, because the truth is that if any property you were going to gamble on the way that New Line did with Lord of the Rings, Dune was the one to roll that dice on.
100%.
And just get ahead of it, because they're doing a TV show allegedly and stuff too, so why not just do both movies back to back? That way it's there.
That being said, I have all faith. I have all faith in Denis Villeneuve to have laid the groundwork to do it anyway, for the most part. So I'm hoping that it'll still work out. I think it will, because we have too much talent involved for it not to. But I agree 100% with you.
Yeah, and so in saying all that, it's just really fascinating, because do you remember the lead up to Lord of the Rings? I was young. I know you were a little older than I was in it, but I remember even when I was young, feeling like people were really unsure about how this movie was going to turn out. There was a lot of talk around the movie just being a dud out the gate. People were kind of convinced, it felt like, that it was going to fall on its face. You had a director that not a lot of people knew at the time coming into this thing. And then that first teaser hit. And I remember it kind of changed the tune.
Right. It really did. I remember exactly what you're talking about, because there was a time I actually always kind of had faith in it, but I had a naive faith in film at that point. I was like, Lord of the Rings, how could you go wrong?
Right.
But at the same time,
things that you and I will never, ever say ever again about anything.
Ever say. I mean, I should have known
Die
better.
Hard,
Right?
what could go wrong?
Wrong, exactly.
Die Hard, what could go wrong?
A fifth Die Hard movie? Give it to me. Put it in my blood. No, okay. Never mind.
Yeah.
But I did exactly the same thing. I was like, sweet, this is going to be great. And I knew Peter Jackson. And I was like, they're rolling the dice on Peter Jackson? awesome. I love the Frighteners. I love Dead Alive. I love it. I mean, this is
The Frighteners is an all-time classic.
100%. Loved everything about it. Like this is legitimately going to be great. But then that teaser hit, and I feel like all of a sudden everybody else who was around me started to agree with me. I was like, oh, I get what we're doing here, and I like it. And
yeah, so that's what's so fascinating to me is that then the movie opens and it makes pretty good money. Its first 5 days, it makes $75 million in the U.S. and Canada. It was 47 for the opening weekend. It was number one at the box office, beating Ocean's 11. But hear that number again: $47 million its opening weekend, and it was number one.
Wow!
If you heard that now, people would be like, "I'm sorry, that's massively underperforming. This movie's a dud."
Right? Exactly.
Right.
What a time!
What a fucking time! Like things are way different now. It gets pretty much universal praise. It's got this movie ends up shaping an entire generation overnight.
Right.
And then for the weeks to follow, because Lord of the Rings fever was real.
Oh, completely.
Lord of the Rings fever was incredibly real. And no one for the next 4 years would talk about just about anything else blockbuster filmmaking wise, the way that you talked about this.
I loved everything about it, and I loved the idea that came out when it came out because it had, like we said before, it had no real bona fide box stars, superstars. It was all kind of solid actors who had performed great in roles. Some newcomers, Orlando Bloom, obviously a very newcomer. But they also had some random choices, like having Sean Astin as the Goonie being involved, having like Elijah Wood be the lead, having like
the problem child of all things.
Right,
or the good,
exactly.
The good, not the problem child, the good son. The good son.
That was it.
The other one. Him and Macaulay Culkin.
The actual
spoiler alert. Yeah, spoiler alert. Macaulay Culkin throws him off a cliff at the end of the movie.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. Not good for him anyway. Not good for him. Yeah. But all the people. I mean, then you got so many great character actors too. John Rhys Davies, Christopher Lee, who was a boon to this. Obviously, Christopher Lee, if you don't know this, I'm sure if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you know this, but he was actually friends with J.R.R. Tolkien and was initially one person who Tolkien wanted him to play Gandalf at one point, and knew the material source to left and right. I mean, I think he was better cast as Saruman. Because that's only because Ian McKellen was like no perfect. If you want to talk about, I think that's an episode we should do at some point, like top 10 casting choices and sort of like adapting characters to screen from stage to screen. Yeah. Ian McKellen would be one of them, as far as I'm concerned. No perfect.
100%. It's funny because between this and Harry Potter, which come out very close together, by the way, like very close together timeline wise, these movies are right on top of each other as far as like magical fantasy, sci-fi, beloved worlds coming to life. In two note perfect castings of like older wizards was him and then Richard Harris.
It's funny, of course, as Richard Harris is passing, they actually went to Ian McKellen to be Dumbledore.
Yeah.
And Ian McKellen rejected it because it was too much like Gandalf, and that's both completely true and in a way completely unfortunate, because I'd love to have seen Ian McKellen's take on Dumbledore, to be honest with you, but I get that
it could not have been any worse than what we got after the fact.
I will say I understand Michael Gambon's attempted take on a lot of his things, but it was not quite the Dumbledore we were used to, that's for sure.
I can't get over him grabbing Harry in Goblet of Fire and shoving him against a fucking glass.
It's the meme.
Like system thing, and him being like yelling at him. That is so not Dumbledore. Look, he's still a good actor and he does some very good performance stuff later in the movies, but like there's also some baffling fucking choices.
I will say that the one choice that threw me the less, because the one you talked about is probably the most talked about anti-Gambon thing in Dumbledore. It's like the meme and everything else. The one that actually got me even worse, I thought, was when I think it was Order of the Phoenix. I want to say Order of the Phoenix. Yeah, when what's her name? Umbridge dismisses Trelawney, and like, Dumbledore, the books was very cool about it. He actually got underneath her skin and got him back involved, yada yada, and like dismissed it. He's always kind, always whatever. Kill him with kindness. And at that point, Game Mode chooses to look at the rest of the kids who are all watching it. Did you got classes to go to or something like that? I'm kind of like, that's not Dumbledore, dude. That's not Dumbledore, dude. Dumbledore doesn't get mad like that.
No, and it's so funny in hindsight now because, like, say what you will about the Fantastic Beasts movies, Jude Law ended up being such perfect casting as young Dumbledore.
Yeah, he's good.
And it's made me that much more irritated after the fact because I'm like, this one feels like he becomes Richard Harris.
Right, agreed. Not become Michael Denbo.
My problem is I don't see any of Michael Gambon at all. Yes, we have moved into the Wizarding World side of the Lord of the Rings podcast. We'll be here all night.
Jarvie, I hope you're proud of yourself. You know what? Okay, we started getting into it. Let's actually start getting into it now. We already have we already talked about Peter Jackson's direction, and we also talked about the production stuff. That's the main thing. Actually, the production stuff is what we should talk about. How beautiful this looks. The site, New Zealand.
To your point.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to step on your point too, because
That's
you
okay.
said something that I wanted to bring up earlier before getting sidetracked about Michael Gambon. You know what is fascinating about this? And it's something I actually never realized until this watch through.
Okay.
And I'd never really noticed it before, and I think it actually explains why it's my favorite of all the movies. And it has to do with Peter Jackson's direction, is that this of the three is the most horror movie of the franchise. And it's really fascinating watching it back. It's super magical and whimsical, but it's scary. It's dark. It's foreboding. The stuff with the Nazgul. There's all these like interesting directions that make the movie kind of terrifying. It's almost like baby's first horror movie. And it's the only one of the... Yeah, right? It's really interesting. And so I really was watching it last night, fascinated that I had never really caught that before, that this movie leans very much near horror at times.
Wow, that's spot on, my friend. That's spot on. I never thought about that way either until you mentioned. Now that I'm thinking back like that, there's definitely, because I definitely noticed some horror elements. Like you said, the Nazgul are terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah,
the torture scene of Gollum, terrifying. Yeah. Gandalf in Bag End, talking like when he's all scared about the ring. Very horror film vibes. Not gonna lie. Good job. Good work.
The Balrog stuff, almost the entire Mines of Moria sequence. Like, I'm telling you, man, this movie is actually much more of a horror movie than I think people realize. Yeah, and it's so, like, I know that that's kind of funny that, of course, I found that watching this again, but it's more of the, even when you see the Orcai being brought to life for the first time, like, it's kind of body horror. And there's a lot of just really cool Jackson going, I'm going to make it creepy. I'm going to make it fun. I'm going to make you love Middle Earth, but I'm going to make you scared of it too.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that.
I agree, especially I mentioned the body horror when they come out of like the cocoon that they have. Yeah. Whatever it is.
Yeah. It's fucking wild. It really is. Dude, I was fascinated rewatching this as a horror movie last night going, this is a 3.5 hour long fantasy horror film.
Yeah, it's good. I like it, man. I love it. I'm here for it. But I want to let's get right into it. Well, first of all, I was talking about New Zealand and everything else, but I want to say the thing that struck me most about this film in the beginning, like watching it again, is do you remember the first when this came out? People were kind of against the idea of the prologue being so long. Like there was this big opening prologue that's narrated by Cate Blanchett, and you're kind of like, well, why are we doing this? This is wasting time. And first of all, not only did I never have a problem with it, I think it's a beautiful way to introduce the saga, as epic as this saga is. What are your thoughts on the prologue?
Yep. I love the prologue. I actually think it's part of what makes me love the movie so much. And it's so funny that people get upset about it, but I find it enthralling and encapsulating, and it's such a great way to give you an exposition dump, right? Like, they need to give us all this information. What a way to do it. Like, you can do what Star Wars did, right? You can give us an opening crawl, or you can give us 10 minutes of the movie that focuses on the history. And I love it. I think it's really beautiful and it's really fun. And it's funny because I actually think Del Toro looked at that when he was making Pacific Rim. Because Pacific Rim has a very similar exposition type opening that really relishes in the world and the things that you're about to see. And I've always felt that way. Like, I think that this is one of the best uses of creating a prologue for a world that people wouldn't be familiar with and teaching them a lot of information, but making it palatable, because it could be really, really overwhelming.
Agreed 100%. I think it helps when you have somebody like Cate Blanchett doing the dialogue, because there are certain actors who, when you just listen to their voices for some reason, they draw you in. I mean, it doesn't have to be, usually ends up being like someone like an Ian McKellen, like an older British actor who has that kind of narration, or a Christopher Walken who has a certain way he speaks that kind of forces you to listen. But Cate Blanchett is one of those people where she just has this kind of musical voice to it. And you got to come along with the Howard Shore score. You're watching this whole big epic battle unfold. And it's so great considering what we followed up with, because we followed up with this like innocence as we introduce the hobbits and we get into the Shire, which is so monumentally important to the rest of the saga, because obviously at the end of the day, the whole trilogy really surrounds about how the changes in somebody who comes from an innocent background, and you juxtapose the hobbits in the Shire at the beginning of this film versus the hobbits in the Shire at the end of Return of the King, and it's so different. But the intro, the prologue rather, gives you that kind of like sense of, this is the epic adventure we're going to have. Now meet our characters at the beginning.
Yeah, and here's the thing: like, I love the opening of this. It's the same way I actually feel about An Unexpected Journey. Is that it's also very clear that Jackson learned from Lucas it's like poetry; it rhymes, and having the first two films of your two trilogies spend the first 45 minutes hanging in the Shire, getting to know these characters. Like, this is a big blockbuster franchise where it's like supposed to be this grand epic, and you spend the first hour chilling in the Shire. And I love that.
I do too.
Like, don't get me wrong, it pushes the story forward. It's great, but you spend the first hour of the movie chilling in the Shire.
And it's interesting that it begins with the prologue the way it does, and because like this is a book which is like you don't realize. I mean, you realize it when you're a Lord of the Rings fan, but to people who hadn't seen the story before or didn't know much about it, it is a sequel to The Hobbit. So you have all this backstory from The Hobbit that we don't really know about with Bilbo and the ring and everything else. And they do a great job at the beginning in the Shire, giving us all that exposition dump without making it boring at all. It just feels like part of the long adventure we're on. And it gives so much detail. They do a wonderful job with the exposition in this film.
I think that's one of Jackson's biggest strengths as a filmmaker, because it's something that he did in King Kong. It's something he's done as far back as The Frighteners. He's always been good at delivering a lot of information in specific ways like this that really make a world feel lived in and like real, I guess is the best way to describe it. Every movie of his, even Dead Alive, like, it doesn't matter what I've watched with his filmmaking, he's always managed to make me feel like these worlds are real, and that's because he really puts the thought into making me feel that. And he gives me reasons to, and the prologue is a great way of doing that. The Shire of it all is a great way of doing that. Like, our first interaction with Bilbo and Gandalf, it feels so much like we've already known these characters so long, because he sits on that for so long. And it's like just a small thing where their interaction feels kind of, oh wait, what's happening? Is there like bad blood here? Only for it to like the chuckles and like the feeling of real camaraderie and friendship. Like, suddenly, hey, I know these characters. Oh, cool. This is how they interact.
Right. And I'd say actually that even starts out before it gets there. It's the interaction to me between Gandalf and Frodo, which we don't even know as a character.
Oh, that's what I meant was Frodo. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I meant Frodo.
I thought you meant Gandalf with Bilbo, which actually does the same thing.
No, I meant Gandalf with Frodo. Look, they're hobbits. They all They're all small, have hairy feet. They look the same.
Wow, that's a strong take, but okay. Okay,
all those hobbits, they look alike.
The funny thing is, like you mentioned, because you said Bilbo, and I was thinking because it does actually make sense. Also, because his interactions with Bilbo are much similar in the way you have the idea of Bilbo's pissed off or annoyed, and he knocks on the door, and also you get this magical like, do they know each other? Are they not? Are they obviously don't like each other? And then when he sees him, he's like, "Oh, Gandalf, this is the guy. This is the guy who gets me out of everybody who knows." I guess like you feel like right away. But yeah, the Frodo moment was also funny as well. It's a great way to just show how great Gandalf is and what he's known for mischievousness, but also loves the mischief. Like has like the fireworks go off and the kids are behind him. The kids get behind him ready to see it. And then also the fireworks go off. It's so great. I love it. And I love the best part also is the Hobbit farmer that sees him. And like he gives him the frown and then like the fireworks go off and he kind of smiles at it. Like, oh, this is kind of fun. But then the wife sits next to him, he looks away. And also has a return to the crew.
Yeah.
His face. Those are great character moments of the Shire that Jackson just really hit out of the ballpark. I love it so much.
And you know what's really impressive too is, and this is kind of going back and forth on what we've been talking about a bit as like far as this opening is concerned, but how great the stuff from The Hobbit ends up fitting the world of this in hindsight. Yeah. Jackson did a really nice job, actually, because as Bilbo's telling his stories, like he's telling the kids about the ogre incident, the trolls, but also even the prologue stuff. Like the stuff that he shot with Martin Freeman is pretty close to the stuff that he shot with Ian Holm for this, because we do see Ian Holm find the ring and things like that. He shoots it very similarly, enough that like. It's obviously not a one-to-one recreation, but like, it feels close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. And I think you and I are on the same page about that. I think that's why I think if we had to talk about the Hobbit trilogy, no, we're not going to get into that because it's too long of a conversation, but I will say one of the things that I really loved about it, which I don't think it got it to do at all, people complained about it, is because it was a kid's story, kid's book, versus Lord of the Rings, which was definitely meant more for adults. So the Hobbit actually... So Peter Jackson had a job of like taking the Hobbit kid source material and tonally matching it with the Lord of the Rings, which he had before, and that meant adding the epics, adding the epic parts at the end, which the appendices, which add on to that storyline and make it more tonally connect with Lord of the Rings. And I think the Hobbit did a good job doing that. Of course, again, that's some people didn't like that aspect, but I think you and I can agree on that. At least you and I do, if nobody else does. But you're right. You are absolutely right.
And that's what I love about it. And you know what's fun too is like just spending this time with these characters. You really get to know Merry and Pippin, and them. Again, you brought it up, kind of the fucking around with the fireworks, and then just kind of the chaos of it all. But even then, there's a sense of foreboding in Bilbo's actions, and you're kind of waiting for that shoe to drop, and I've always liked that. There's a really good build in the tension that just hits.
Yeah.
And I love it.
The 111th birthday party is so well done. It's funny. It's fun. It really hits home the rest of the Shire. We get to meet Frodo and Bilbo first. We get to meet the rest of the Shire, and just spot on introductions to Merry, to Pippin, spot on introductions to the Gaffer, spot on introductions to the Saxville Bagginses, and you get a drunken Bilbo going, my 11th birthday, and it's so fun. Yeah. But then it builds up to that tension, just like you said. And the biggest, most tense moment we have is one of my favorite moments in the entire saga. Is this moment when Bilbo puts the ring on, disappears, goes back to his place, has this conversation with Bilbo about the ring, and we see that the ring is finally starting to tempt Bilbo over the time. It obviously tempted Gollum all these years. Obviously, a lot of power. For whatever reason, hobbits seem to be a little more able to resist it compared to other creatures. But it does eventually get you, and Bill was obviously tempted. And we have that moment where he starts fighting back against Gandalf, and all of a sudden Gandalf gets big and he's, "Do not take me for a conjurer of party tricks." And it's like, oh shit, that's Gandalf. Now, we haven't seen Gandalf.
Yeah.
That's fucking Gandalf. But Gandalf chooses to be this lighthearted, fun, kind of like loving individual who loves peace, smoking pot, and and relaxing. That's what he does. But when he gets badass, he can get badass. And that was one of my greatest, I was like right there, that summed up Gandalf to a T to me. And I was like, this is this is brilliantly this is a brilliant introduction to who he is.
It totally is, and again, God, the filmmaking in it.
Oh, God,
like the
yes.
filmmaking in these sequences is just so incredible. And talk again about the horror movie vibe of it all. The way that he interacts with him in that moment is terrifying. It feels scary because suddenly he's huge. It's dark around him. There's just like a sense of menace to what he is, but it's because he's worried about Bilbo. And he sees what's happening, and he sees that the ring is starting to affect him because he knows what happens, as we learn later in the movie. What happened to Smeagol?
Right, 100%.
The ring rot his brain.
His soul, his inner, everything about him, he rot. It's really intense. So then Bilbo leaves, and of course, that's when I think he finally, at that moment, really understands what this ring is or what this ring could be, and he leaves it with Frodo. It's kind of an interesting thing because I don't think they really. Peter Jackson, I don't know. I guess it's not necessary, but it's also not clear how long Gandalf is gone for. Because Gandalf just like Isengard and starts, not Isengard, runs to Minas Tirith to look up something, trying to figure out if this was the actual One Ring. And all of a sudden, when he comes back, like it's supposed to be like months later, but you kind of don't get that vibe. Like it's kind of like he's been gone for a couple hours, almost a day or two.
Well,
but
people forget this is like a 13-month journey.
Yeah, exactly. I have no idea why it's so, but I guess it's not that important because, it's like at the end of the day, this is what needed to happen. Gandalf needed to leave. You see Frodo being Frodo, and then Gandalf comes back. When Gandalf comes back, we have the great moment there where you figure out that it is the One Ring. You got the One Ring speech written on the ring in the tongue of Mordor, which he doesn't want to utter there, so to speak. But it sets the adventure off in a great fashion because we have the tale of the end of the world. We have this young hobbit whose family has already been involved in adventures that we know of. I try to look at this without saying I don't know. All I know from the Hobbit story is what was presented to us because that's kind of how I wanted to see it because it's a new version of it. So I try to look at it that way. So all we know is that Bilbo had some great adventures at some point. Now Frodo's kind of following in his footsteps, so to speak.
And there's this idea that Bilbo kind of talks about later in the movie when he's actually, Frodo talks about with Bilbo later in the movie, where he even says, I miss the Shire. Once this adventure has started, he's missing the Shire, and he goes, I spent so much of my time growing up in the Shire, wanting to leave, and being on an adventure with you, and having one of your adventures.
Right.
And now I don't know if I want it. I don't know if I can handle this. Because he's realizing that there's a great amount of pain that comes with this. There's a great amount of responsibility that comes from this.
Right, 100%. But the funny part of it is, to me, is like how it has this whole big responsibility thing. And what Lord of the Rings has done best throughout the entire trilogy is it balances it out with something, I don't want to say just humorous. It's not always humorous, but something a little more lighthearted, more to make sure we're not falling in amongst the doom and gloom. And that is, of course, you bring Samwise Gamgee into it. Not like this big thing. Oh my God, somebody's listening to the door. Who is it? We're just talking about. It's a horror aspect to it. Like we're just talking about the horror monster. Also, you're noises outside. Oh my God, what is it? No, it's just Samwise Gamgee, who's not dropping no eaves, sir. Dropping no eaves. And of course, it gets the whole idea.
It's a little late to be doing whatever.
Cutting verges or slicing verges, yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you hear? Tell me. I didn't hear anything. Just someone got a ring and down in the end of the world, and it's so.
I gotta say, man, it's incredible to see Sean Astin getting to do stuff like this because for so many people, I said it up top, the joke is they cast a kid from the Goonies, and the reason I say that is because for all intents and purposes, for a lot of people. Sean Astin is, he was Mikey in the Goonies. He was also Rudy. But there wasn't a lot in Sean Astin's filmography that told me that Sean Astin could be a co-lead of a major fantasy adventure franchise.
And not only that,
he had ever done.
Not only that, but quite frankly, I think it's arguably, some people say it, I'll flat out say it. He's the heart of the franchise. Heart of the
I don't disagree at all. I think that he's actually the reason that the franchise works because I really buy his performance. I really believe his friendship. I really believe all of the stuff that we're seeing in it. And it's so funny to me because I think that the people who don't like the character misunderstand the importance of the character.
The people who dislike this character, because I've never heard anybody, because this, honestly, to me...
Look, it's the internet. If you go deep enough...
True. He was perfect for it. He actually was the audience's way in. He was the most, he was the not blank, because he wasn't blank, but like you want him to succeed. You want him to get everything he wants. What he wants is for Frodo to succeed. So by notion, we want Frodo to succeed more than if we didn't have Sam in there.
Well, and I think the importance is that he feels so human. All these characters actually do, and I think that's a really important thing to really point out about the trilogy in this movie in particular, is that it needs to build these characters to be human. Mm-hmm. You need to be able to buy into their characters and their journeys and the stories and their pitfalls. You need to feel it. You need to be able to really embrace it, and there's something so human about Sam. We all have that person in our life that you want to stand behind and you go, look, it doesn't matter what happens. I'm going to be here for you.
Right.
I'm going to push you to succeed. And we've all been that person, and we all want that person in our life. And it's amazing how important that part ends up being throughout these movies, because not only that, he ends up being a great comedic foil. He ends up being a great heart of the movie. Like, everything about this character, and in particular Sean Astin's performance, it's a big win for this franchise.
It is. My favorite, probably, spoiler in a way, I'm going to skip right to the end of this movie, but maybe I'll get there. One of my favorite whole lines in the whole movie, and maybe in the whole saga, is the whole idea he starts walking out of the water. He's like, "No, Sam, I'm going alone." Of course you are, and I'm coming with you. Like, it sums up his character so perfectly. You're like, oh my God, he can't swim. He's still going after him. He's still going to walk into the water, nearly drown just to try to get to the boat and make Frodo get him in order to hang out with him. Like, it so perfectly encapsulates the heart of the film, Sean Astin's character as Sam. It's a beautiful moment, man. I tear up every time when I'm watching it.
I mean, it's a great moment, and I'm going to tell you right fucking now, there's no way on God's green earth that I'm going to fucking swim out to you in your boat if you're trying to leave me to drown.
That's fair enough, I guess. So I probably would leave you to drown because, you just weigh the boat down or something. I don't know.
Yeah, see, I fucking knew it. I something about that just told me. No, but seriously, man, I agree with you. And it's so funny because, we've condensed the first hour of this movie into a lot of certain talking points. But the truth is that the first hour of this movie is kind of the next 2 hours too, in a very specific way, because the thing about this one compared to the other two is that there's not a lot of big battles in this movie. There's not a lot of things that are happening. This is a very character-driven story because it's the only one of the movies where we spend the entire time with the Fellowship. Because by the time it's over, the Fellowship is broken.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. So you spend this entire movie with these characters, getting to know all of them, and that's kind of what I dig, because there's two really great battle sequences, but overall, this is a actual fantasy journey. We're seeing different parts of the world. We're going to Rivendell. We're seeing these different places for the first time, and it's kind of thrilling and enthralling, and you just really get wrapped up into it. But it's the moment that they start to leave the Shire, and, he says, don't take the name Baggins. People are going to be looking for that. And just that first time that they come into contact with one of the Nazgul, and, that just pure terror and excitement in that. Dude, Jackson fucking crushed this.
He did so much. Every character in the Fellowship really has their moments, too. For a lot, there's 9 members of this Fellowship, and y'all can point out to certain things that, okay, I get. It doesn't take long. A lot of times when you get a lot of characters in a movie, there's complaints where you didn't get to know these characters well enough, or whatever kind of thing. I feel like they did. They did in this one. They made just enough here and there. Merry and Pippin have their humor moments in the beginning of the film, actually at the birthday, but they also show great character moments as well. Merry, who does it at least twice, one of my favorite moments, both times involve him showing his absolute loyalty to his friends. He has no idea what's going on in this bigger picture. But like the 2 times I can imagine when he goes, the Nazgûl start chasing them down and they hide. He has no idea what's going on. He's no idea now. He like looks at it and like, what the hell was that? And Frodo doesn't give him any explanation, just says, we got to get out of here. And Merry doesn't like go, what do you mean? All right, buckle by Frey, let's do it. He reminds me of like Jeremy Renner in the town. He's like, whose car are we taking? It's like, no questions needed. Yeah. Let's go.
That was actually one of my favorite. Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments in the movie, actually, in hindsight. I never had really realized that Frodo doesn't say anything, and they just kind of go, you know what? We're just following. We're going to get out of here. Let's go. Like,
my brother
they could have look, any other movie probably would have had some sort of argument sort of thing or some situation to, like, drive tension, but Jackson knows that the tension doesn't come from them infighting. There's no good that comes from that. The tension needs to come from the situation, and the better resolve of this is to have them all just buy into each other and protect each other and move forward in it.
You don't need any one-liners in there. You don't need any tension that way because the tension gets eased out later on for other humorous moments that fit the time frame. Here, you just need to show these guys are loyal. These guys are a fellowship. Same thing happens at the end of the film after obviously Boromir attacks and then the Uruk-hai come and Merry and Pippin see Frodo who's already decided to leave the fellowship at that point. And he looks over and like, come on, and say, all Frodo has to do is go, no. And what does Merry do? Right away, just knows he's leaving. All right, then what am I going to do? All I can do is, hey, over here, come get me, and like give him a chance to get out, sacrificing himself. Basically, he's basically sacrificing himself just so Frodo can get away. He has no idea why. He just knows that's the choice he made. He's going to support him. I don't care what your choice you're making. I'm going to support you because you're my brother. It's so awesome. It's everybody needs a Merry in their life. Put it that way. And Pippin is that way too, to a degree. He's just not as smart as Merry as far as reading people and understanding what's going on. That's all.
Which is why they're very perfect for the movie, to be honest, because especially into Two Towers, you really get this vibe from them that, like everyone else, they're seeing their own changes, but like they're very perfectly comedic when they need to be, but they end up being so integral to the rest of the story and the change of Middle Earth. And the one thing I love about all of this too is that the more you think about it, the more that this one journey on this one hobbit being like the end-all, be-all, end-of-days style story that they're dealing with, all because some hobbit found this ring 60 years ago in a cave. Like, it's just such an interesting way to be like, look, your uncle's actions caused your pain, but you can do something about it, and we know you don't want to, but like you literally have the weight of the world on your shoulders. That's nuts to me.
That is nuts. And you said it best, though. You said it best. Really, you made a great point about. I mean, their friendships, Merry and Pippin, really are the underlying. I know you said a heart of the story with Sam, but that's an underlying, very big, important sequence as well. Watching them change from the joking, loving hobbits in the beginning, they're stealing fireworks, the people who really changed the world and are brothers. But also another similar friendship, Legolas and Gimli, same type of thing. They have this somewhere where elves and dwarves obviously are not in good standing at this point. They make that clear at the meeting of the Fellowship. They make that clear later on when they go into the Lothlorien. And it's a very humorous moment. Gimli, like, I'm got an eyes like hawk, and here's like, and then the arrows in front of them. Oh. That's one of my favorite lines. Like I say, I know we're doing on tangents here. I was watching this. Kim was with me. Kim kind of came out and out while I was watching this, and we loved it together. When the elf Haldir and Aragorn are talking, and they talk in Elvish, and Gimli gets visibly frustrated. He's kind of like, "There's so much for the Elvish courtesy. Talk so everybody knows what you're saying," kind of thing. And then like Haldir turns to him and says something about like, "Or dwarves and elves have not had time and whatever, or haven't had dealings in such time." And then Gimli says something about, it just says, starts talking Dwarvish, and the subtitle just says, talks rudely in Dwarfish. And then he's just looking at Aragorn and going, oh God, Gimli.
And then his literal response is like, that was not
courteous.
Yeah, that was not very courteous. And just, Aragorn looks like he's dealing with a child.
It really is, and he is.
Like, Aragorn just looks annoyed.
I gotta say, I'll point up right here. Gimli, my favorite part of the entire saga, because of that. His humor's in there, but he's also got this noble heart of a champion. And noble, like in terms of like dwarves are always the one. It seems like they treat dwarves mostly well. Lord of the Rings, they kind of treat them like overachievers, but like they throw him into these battles where he is like doesn't care if he's fighting everybody. He'll fight everybody. He'll take on everybody. He's like a little short guy who's just like gonna defeat the world, and that's whether he's defending Balin.
You see yourself in this character, don't you?
I do. I really do. When I played Lord of the Rings online, I was always a dwarf guardian. That's why I had to do it.
I knew it. I part of me was like, you see yourself in this character, don't you?
I want to be the Hewish guy who I'll throw myself into anything, but I'm very loyal to my friends when I make you friends. And that's exactly the best part because they should. But going back to what I was saying about Legolas and Gimli is they also do what Pippin and Merry do is over the course of the trilogy. Their change is what's good for the world. They put aside their differences to become the best of friends through competition, through fun. At the end of the day, they're best friends. They started this. They hate. It's almost like a big racial thing. It's almost like an anti-special, of course, this way. But it's like different races. In this case, races are hating each other because they're different races. But by the end, they put their tensions together to make a better, harmonious world. It's a great tale and another key theme to this trilogy.
The first time that we hear the Fellowship theme, when everyone's arguing and Frodo finally says, "I'll take the ring," dude, I get chills every single time. Also, we totally skipped over this, and I meant to bring it up earlier, but again, here's the thing. Unlike our horror movies where we try to go beat to beat, look, this movie's 3.5 hours long. We're going to try to get as much information into this podcast as possible for you guys without missing beats. But when they go to the inn and they're waiting for Gandalf for the first time since they've left, and they end up meeting Strider for the first time, as it turns out, is Aragorn. But that whole sequence is really great. And again, talk about like the thriller tension of it all. Like they know that things are wrong. Don't use the Baggins name. And then what happens? Well, this friggin' Took just decides that he's going to tell everyone who's who. And it's such a great moment. But the minute when Frodo puts the ring on his finger, and then the Nazgul all stop, it's just so terrifying, and you're like, Jesus, which leads to the moment of them stabbing the beds, like,
right there.
Dude.
Yeah. That is a great
Jackson
moment.
Really...
He did.
Jackson sells all of it. Like, it's so good, especially the edit where they stab into the bed the first time, and it cuts to Sam, and he's like, he gasps out loud, and you're like, oh, God, like, they got Sam, and then it's like, no, they're actually across the way. And he's woken up by them screaming because they got bamboozled by a couple of hobbitses.
Also, as you tangent back and say we didn't really talk about Gandalf and Saruman, actually. Obviously, at that point, Gandalf goes to see Saruman before he sends all the hobbits off on their journey. And we have this great moment of theater there where we learn that Saruman has betrayed the world and has joined forces with Sauron. And it's so weird story-wise because in any other movie, this is the kind of betrayal that you wouldn't have seen until at least the second act. Like, it was kind of a thing like they would have had played Saruman as a friend, as an ally, as working with you, and then they would have pulled off the turn, so to speak. We get a turn, like the first time we meet Saruman. But it still works. You go there, like Saruman, they display how powerful Saruman is. They display that we saw Gandalf being powerful briefly, and then we see Saruman pretty much whoop his ass. Overall, I mean, Gandalf puts up a little fight. It's a little weird. The choice is that we're not going to show any fireworks. It's all going to be basically force pushing a lot. So that's how they do magic.
I kind of love that. Is that
I did not like it. I know some people hated it, and I can't say I loved it like you did, but it didn't bother me like some people.
I just find it so fascinating because it almost becomes like they're toying with each other, or actually rather, Saruman is toying with Gandalf. Like,
that's what it needs to.
That's kind of what it feels like the whole time. And I kind of dug that vibe. It's a little different and it's a little strange. But at the same time, it's like...
Choice.
Yeah. Choice. Not what I would have expected from two wizards like that. But I kind of dig that. Because the truth is like, I look at... Well, a good example of this is the most latest Fantastic Beasts film when they finally get, spoiler alert, Grindelwald and Dumbledore have their fight. It kind of looks boring. Like it's trying to be all, look, there's colors and things, and it's like, honestly, I kind of prefer this version of it, where it's like I don't have to see anything, and they're just kind of pushing each other back and forth and like toying with each other. It just works a little better to me.
I get that. And Saruman does actually have the moment where he just grabs the staff and has both staffs and just flings them away. So he shows Stickins how powerful he is, really. I get that as well. But moving back over now to where we were with the thing, one of my favorite parts about this as well is after the hobbits leave with Strider, and there's a time where we don't know who Strider is. We don't understand that Strider is the hero that he is. But Jackson does a great job with one line of dialogue to make you trust him. Because all the hobbits are like, I don't know, why are we following this guy when he's following? And Frodo has that line, which I love. And I know I believe it's from the book itself. Actually, I can't remember exactly, but it's like the idea is like one of Sauron's agents would feel fairer and seem fouler, kind of thing, or something like that. Instead of, and it made sense like that. Okay, he'd be like more of a used car salesman. This guy feels like a good guy, even though he's like doesn't really seem like it in a way. It showcases where Frodo's mind's at, and almost like it's like letting the audience know you're good with this guy. This guy's a good guy.
Yep.
I love that.
I love that. Love it so much. And I think there's a lot of that in this movie. Again, like, we spend so much time, again, I've said it throughout, getting to know characters. And I love that for it. I love that we spend so much goddamn time with the characters. And I think that's stuff that's missed in a lot of modern filmmaking a lot of the time. And I'm not someone that says that there's no good modern filmmaking. That's not it at all. It's just, it's kind of funny when you think about it. Like, Spider-Man No Way Home is kind of a perfect example of this, that they figured out a way to let you hang out with the villains and hang out with the Peters. And that was a really great way to, like, oh yeah, you're kind of reminded why you liked these guys. And of course, it helped that we knew the characters, but that movie's a hangout movie for like 75% of it, honestly.
You're not wrong.
Like, it is. And that's not a bad thing. I think that movies could benefit from taking the time to just hang out with their characters sometimes. And I think that this trilogy once again proves why, because by the time you get to the end, it's almost like you ran a marathon. It's a little exhausting, but I kind of love that. But at the same time, I never don't understand the character motivations. I never feel like I'm lost in the shuffle. Everyone feels like clear, dynamically put together. And that works for me. And I think that, to your point, like, you spend this time with it and then you go, look, I can trust this character. Yep. And I think that's really great. Pirates of the Caribbean did a great job with this right around the same time. They learned that. Hang out with those characters and then put them in, like, whatever situation.
Yep. Because you care more about them, absolutely. Speaking of that, the next time...
Sorry, I know that was like a long tangent. I apologize.
No, don't ever apologize for that. I get that. That's what we do. That's what we do on this show, let's be honest with each other.
That's true. It is.
Going on to the next part, though, it actually brings back the next sequence that reminds me of a horror movie is the top of Weathertop Mountain. It's like they have the fire going, and all of a sudden Frodo's like, oh my god, put it out. And what do you see underneath? You see those Nazgul coming to surround. It's like the horror slasher monster has found you and is going to come up the mountain to kill you. It's so brilliantly done. Until, again, we get the heroic Strider saving the day. It's a good action sequence that needed at that time. We didn't have a whole lot of action in the beginning of the film. We had the prologue action, which is prologue action, so it's not real action. Had a lot of racing, a lot of chasing. There's a time where we actually got a little bit of a hand-to-hand combat sequence, and Strider definitely shows his worth beating off all the freaking Nazgul. While, I mean, Frodo does get stabbed, but that's okay.
Well, he does get stabbed. It's just with, like, weird toys,
Yeah. That sounds like a totally different kind of version.
I love that sequence. Again, what a horror sequence.
Right.
Everything about it, even when he puts the ring on and you're seeing the other side, if you will, in that, and, like, how that looks. And seeing the faces of men, because, Frodo asks him earlier in the film, what are those? And, he goes, they were once men. In fact, they were once kings of men who've now been, they've been corrupted by the ring's power because of Saruman. And, like, that's just so crazy. And you're like, God damn, man. Like, that's fucking nuts.
It is fucking nuts.
And I love that. Or Sauron. I'm sorry. It's not Saruman.
I got
Sauron. That's the only thing. I do get a little mixed up with those two just because the names are too fucking similar.
Right. 100%. 100%. I get that entirely.
But it's a great beat. It leads to us finally meeting the elves and getting to Rivendell for the first time.
Yes.
Which is great, and that's when we're finally introduced to the great Hugo Weaving as Elrond. Again, let's talk about perfect casting.
Mm-hmm. Perfect casting. A half elf that was. It's just, again, he's also one of those people who speak in a way that you just want to listen to what he has to say, because it's like a very engaging voice sound. You don't want to skip over it, and you want to listen to him. Of course, you also get Arwen, who is a very nice addition as well. I think that Liv Tyler does a great job with what she's given in this movie as well. I think she's got a badass moment in a time where like badass moments were not often given to women. Like she has that moment where she stares down the Nazgul and has the magic with her or other people take him away. It's a great moment.
That's such a great moment, and it might be one of the best Lord of the Rings moments, to be honest.
If you want to, come and clean him. Yeah. Badass, man. I don't want to face her down. Fuck that.
Oh, so man. I love that whole sequence. And, shout out to Liv Tyler, who is very, very good in these. Like,
very much.
Very, very good in these. In a way that I never really saw her as an actress before. That's not to make a dig or anything, but, like, I definitely think that she owns it so well.
Oh, 100%. Well, she hadn't had much real, honestly, not work. I mean, she had been in like Empire Records and That Thing You Do and Armageddon and things like that. But like, this was like kind of like a real different kind of role for her. And she took it and hit it out of the park.
Right. 100%, man. And I think that was the thing, is because at that time she was doing more like Empire Records and like more kind of quirky comedy type stuff. And I wasn't seeing as much of her dramatic work. And so this really stood out to me because it was so different for her. And I'm actually glad, because I think it ultimately probably would have taken me out more if I had seen her in other things. And I think, again, that kind of comes down to the fact that all the casting, for the most part, they cast the people right for the roles who could really make the roles their own. And you'd get lost in the performances and you weren't thinking, hey, that's Sean Connery as a wizard. Because remember, he was almost Gandalf. He turned it down to do League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I gotta say thank God. I love Connery. I don't think you would have hit the same what we were looking for with Gandalf.
I think it would have altered the movie drastically, and probably not in a way that was very good for us. And the funny thing is that was not the only person from League, because originally they had cast someone else as Aragorn.
Yes.
And that was Stuart Townsend, who played Dorian Gray in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
He was coming off as too young.
He was recast. Yeah, he was too young, and he had started shooting. So there is footage out there that exists of Stuart Townsend as that character.
I've never seen it. Yeah, exactly. I would like to have seen. I would like to see it just for the shits and giggles, really. But I, like, even without having seen it, like when Peter Jackson came out and said basically that he was coming off as too young for this kind of character, it makes sense to me. It makes complete sense to me, because I think he does come off as too young. Because I mean, Viggo also obviously is he's like 80 or 90 because of his Dunedain blood or whatever. You find out later on in the Two Towers they do it, right? Yeah, Two Towers they have that sequence in the extended where he tells. Yeah. Miranda Otto's character that he's like 80 whatever, 90 whatever, but so there's got to be kind of like he's got to have one of those faces or eyes that have like lived before, so to speak, and Viggo has that. Viggo comes off as someone who's like an old soul, as you will, much more so than Stuart Townsend would have. I think Stuart Townsend would have been awful in this role, and it's nothing against Stuart Townsend, it's just not his style.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on everything you just said, and I think that's why I'm glad we ended up the way we did. It almost feels like a mishmash of people being in this movie. Like, again, you look at the cast and you're like, wow, there's just some random people in it, but ultimately everyone fits the part. Like, and most of them are bigger names now, post Lord of the Rings. Not saying, again, like Viggo had been in things, obviously. We recognized him, but he wasn't Viggo Mortensen in the way that he was Viggo Mortensen and recognizable after that.
After this, 100%. He was not. I mean, he had been in a few things here. He's been in the aforementioned Crimson Tide. He had been in like,
or how about Young Guns 2?
How about Leatherface and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3? Not the
probably the less we talk about that, the better.
Probably. We're gonna get to we'll get to Texas Chainsaw Massacre at some point too. We have been other things. Oh, we will. We will. Oh, we will. He had been in a lot of movies, and some like were good. Like Crimson Tide was good. Daylight, G.I. Jane. He had some solid form, but like he never really. Oh, I loved him actually in The Prophecy, but that was another one we'll talk about at some point. But this is what made him Viggo Mortensen.
Yeah. So we get to Rivendell. It's October 27th or 28th. I made that note in my head for reasons for later. Is that he wakes up in a certain month on a certain day in Rivendell. No reason that would be information. But I like this. They have the whole sequence where they have the conversation about, the ring and the Fellowship coming together for it. Gimli tries to destroy the ring and it throws him back. It destroys the axe. It's a great shot of the remnants of the axe laying around the ring as people are talking about it.
Yeah.
It's just very, very good. It's very cool. We see Bilbo again. This is where he and Frodo have the conversation about Frodo saying, look, I miss the Shire. I want to go home, basically. I don't know if I can do this. This is much harder than I anticipated.
Yeah, Samwise too. Samwise actually, who has talked about nothing about seeing except for seeing the elves. All of a sudden, he wakes up and Sam is packing and like, yep, let's go. All right, we're good to go. And he's like, wow, you wanted to see the elves? Yep, I saw them. Want to go home. And they're ready to go. They've done their duty. Unfortunately,
by the way, we didn't bring this up earlier, and it's a moment that I really, really love in this version is when they see the elves walking through Middle Earth, and it's very haunting. They kind of look like ghosts, and it looks great. And Frodo even says, "There they go. They're leaving Middle Earth for the last to never come back." And Sam says, "I don't know what it is about this, but it makes me sad."
Yes.
And it's just such a great moment. And it's that then paired with, look, I've seen the elves, but I want to go home now. 100%. I don't want to keep doing this. Like, it's such a great kind of character beat for him. And I always liked that.
Yeah, it is really good. I fully appreciate that moment as well. Good call. Good call back.
Thank you.
Welcome. We are at Elrond's. Obviously, we do get lost. Or you get the Rivendell. We get the great, obviously, the sequence you mentioned. The basically the coming together of everybody. Such an iconic moment having those characters all together.
Yeah,
it's one of the few times
you hearing that
characters together. I even talked about Howard Shore. Howard Shore knocks it out of the park throughout the entire Middle-earth saga. Like it's as recognizable as any theme. Like this is up there with all the great John Williams themes. All the great, Alan Silvestri's, anything you want to talk about. These are some of those most memorable themes that we get. And it's the Shire theme, it's the Fellowship theme. It's just all wonderful music. And it's so unique to Lord of the Rings, too. It feels different. Like you can put out a score and it's like, okay, I kind of know this is in this movie. This is so definitively, boom, we're in Lord of the Rings. You get transported back to Middle Earth. So beautiful.
Honestly, the only person who could have really rivaled Shore's work on this would have been Horner. Because I think Horner could have done something because he did it with Avatar. Say what you will about Avatar, but Avatar's music is very specific to Avatar in the same way that, I hear it and I know immediately. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's definitely Avatar music. I don't necessarily love the movie, but I get that same feeling from the music that I get listening to this. But that Shore's music does so much of the heavy lifting through this franchise because it always feels so encapsulating to the moments that it needs. So that first time you hear the Fellowship music, it's just so incredible and so amazing, and you hear it and you see it and it hits and you're like, man, it fucking works. It's like watching Star Wars for the first time and hearing the John Williams score paired with everything happening on screen.
Right. It's secret sauce. I actually have wondered, it would have been a big thing about Star Wars. If you take away John Williams' music, how does Star Wars feel? And it does feel very different. I kind of wonder the same if there was a different score over Lord of the Rings, would it feel different? I think that the music is married that closely to the sequences as well. So I don't know. It's something
I think that there's something to be said about his score, and I think it would be hard to replicate the feeling of the movies without that. To be honest, that's my take. So we leave from here, and the Fellowship goes on its journey, and they're headed to the Mines of Moria.
Actually, before we go to the Mines of Moria, I do one more thing I have to say that it's one of those moments, and it's in the favorite. Of course, it's in the meeting or whatever. It's again one of those moments that Peter Jackson took to like add a slice of humor, but also a slice of heart. His humor is never just humor; it's always about advancing something.
It always builds
characters, or at least it showcases the heart of the story of what we're going for. And at the end, where they agree to go, or Frodo's like, "I'll go, I'll take it," and you see like Ian McKellen's like sad acceptance face, like that he knew this had to happen, but still is sad that he had to make Frodo do this. But then, of course, what happens? Sam was like, "Well, I'm going too then." And then all of a sudden, Merry and Pippin also run out of her, and you see Elrond going, "What these guys?" But he gets like, instead of getting angry as a king, like he's like, "No, I guess not. Even especially since you already make it to a meeting, a high secret meeting, which you weren't even invited to. I guess I can't keep you from going." And you have the moment Pippin's like, "Well, yeah, you need somebody with intelligence in this kind of, mission, quest, ding."
Where are we going?
Where are we going?
Yeah, like, I mean, that's literally the code of that whole thing is, where are we going? And it's like after everything, and you're like, God damn you, hobbits, is like...
Billy Boyd is the best at that. It happens several times throughout his throughout the trilogy, where he just has this he plays it completely straight, and it only works because he plays it completely straight.
Oh, 100%.
Like he has a look where you're going, like looks completely like this is not the stupidest question you've ever asked in your life. It's so good.
Good. He just believes it. He 100% believes what he's saying, which is the best part.
God, I love it. God, I love it. So.
It's so good, and so we finally get the thing I like. By the way, leading into the Mines of Moria stuff is that we kind of follow them through certain trials, if you will, and it's just little things, but we see some of the journey. It's a little bit like you follow the plane on the red map line in Indiana Jones, but instead you're actually following the characters.
Right.
And again, there's a little bit of a rhyme in that in the Hobbit films, because similarly in the first Hobbit film, when they're journeying at the beginning of the movie, there's a very similar sequence, and that's when you see the dwarves and Bilbo like going along the mountains, and you see titans actually fighting. Remember, like the rock titans against the mountains. And I kind of love that we get something similar here, because again, it just kind of hits right. It's just kind of cool, and you get a feel for Middle Earth, that Middle Earth is scary because it can be anything.
Anything at any time. And the Fellowship is already hurt at this point. I love the fact that they really seed Boromir, like Boromir's decline throughout. Like even that he's the one that really is tempted right at the thing, right at the meeting.
Gandalf notices it right away.
Right away. And the best part about it is Gandalf, who just fought for men, because Gandalf has a sequence with Elrond where he's like, where Elrond's like, "It can't stay here. The elves are going. What are you going to do when the elves leave? Because we're leaving." Dwarves are hiding. They're kind of like keeping to themselves in the mountains. And then Gandalf's like, "Well, we got to hope for men." And Elrond's like, "Men. I know. I was with you, Isildur. I saw where men failed," kind of thing. And sure enough, Boromir is that same way. But not only that, you also see the same thing through Aragorn, because we understand that Aragorn is Aragorn. I say Aragorn. Aragorn had a thing where he's supposed to be the one to do it. He's the heir of Isildur, but he doesn't trust himself even, and it's this great moment. But you get the juxtaposition of those two characters later on the travel, going through the snow. It falls down the snow. Boromir picks up the ring and has that moment where you can see once again he's getting a little in his head about the ring like taking over.
It's trying to possess him. And
Aragorn's like, "No, give him the ring." And Frodo kind of snaps it back, almost like the beginning of Frodo's feeling a little bit, just a little bit, not a lot, but it's enough. The greatest moment is this great shot by Peter Jackson, great shot film wise. Just it travels down and you see like Aragorn's hand was on his sword. On his blade, like he's ready to take the sword out. Like he's gonna have to fight him.
Yeah.
But then he just lets it go, moves on. It's so brilliant. It's so well done. I love that shot. It's
so good.
good.
Well, and you know what's so funny is you bring that up, and I didn't really touch on this in the Rivendell stuff, but Bilbo has that moment of weakness where he almost attacks Frodo, and he goes full Bilbo horror movie. Like, the makeup's super creepy, the lighting's crazy, but like that's the same thing, and he kind of apologizes to Frodo because he knows now what he's put on him. And you start to see that here because you're seeing it through Boromir, but you're also seeing it in Frodo because unbeknownst to most of them is that Frodo's put the ring on.
Yeah.
So he's felt the power.
100%.
And that's a scary thing. Like, you don't know how it's going to affect him. And that's when you kind of start to see him reacting that way.
100%, man. Oh, so good. So good. So many sequences in this movie that are so good. Of course, we get to... Go ahead.
I was going to say, to your point then, we get to the Mines of Moria. And, like, this is an entire 30-minute sequence that's just good. There's too much to talk about through all of it almost. But, like, from them getting there in that opening moment of, like, not really knowing how to get in, then Frodo breaks the riddle to get inside and doors open.
I know.
And then they get attacked by the fucking water creature. And again, talk about horror, like straight up water creature octopus thing. Probably has a name. I don't know its name. I apologize, Middle Earth nerds. But like, it's such a great sequence, and you get inside and you realize this place is a tomb. It is not what they thought it was going to be. You know, Gimli keeps saying, don't worry, we're going to find my people there, and they're going to be very warm and welcoming, and it turns out they've all been murdered.
Right. And Gandalf kind of knew, or at least had an idea, because he was very hesitant to go in there in the first place. Probably still worried about what he was going to find. But yeah, that's a great moment. Again, like you said, he said, speak, friend, and enter. And they go in, and it's a dark place, but they get forced to do so because they have to close the gates, the lights go out, and they have to make their way through. And again, they stop halfway through because also Gandalf has this, like, I have no memory of this place. And they sit down there for a while, and they have this great... Again, there is nothing like the Gandalf conversations. He always just lays truth and lays intelligence down. Like, he has this moment with Bilbo, or rather the Frodo, about Bilbo not killing a Gollum and everything else. And it's a very just like, it's never judgmental, but like, it's like, makes you think. Like, that's why he did it. He left him alive because he pitied him or whatever. It's like, okay. But it's also added punctuate. The best part is like, oh, this way. Oh, you remembered? Nah, I'm just following my nose. It's like, what is this guy? But you still can't help it. You can't help but love it. But then, of course,
I was going to say, the other thing that's great about this moment is then what happens. Their whole thing is they get in there and they have to. It's going to take 4 days to travel through.
Right.
And he says, let us hope that our presence is not really alerted to while we're in here.
Right.
Because he knows this stuff is real, like, nasty, and they've been walking through, and fucking Brandy Took over here just
Perrin
just dealing, or Perrin Took, rather.
Oh, man.
These goddamn hobbitses. He knocks down a soldier's skeleton with all the things
remnants
that you could want. Yeah, like, it's got a sword, and it's got all of his, like, armor, and of course it makes all the noise in the world. And again, talk about horror and tension building.
Yes.
It sits on it forever. And just, you're sitting there and like nothing's happening, and then they're
not only that though, but you hear the sword, you hear the bounds, you hear it bounce, and then you see him, you see the great moments of Peregrine like,
yeah.
But everyone else going like,
but then
not breathing. They can't breathe. Like,
and the camera going to every character and seeing their reactions, and then nothing's going to happen, and so they're going to leave.
Right.
And that's when you start to hear the rumbling, and it's very Jurassic Park.
Actually. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's very Jurassic Park, and that's when we start to see
flames,
all these trolls and shit coming out of nowhere that have been living inside these mines.
Right.
And it's such a great moment, and this battle's great. This is the first battle in the series.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of the prologue stuff, obviously, but like first real battle in this, and it's really intense, and it's really actually very different. I was making a note of it in my head while I was watching it. It feels more like a grimy Vietnam War sequence than it does like an epic battle. Like, it's very in your face. The camera's very like, it feels very methodically done to be so like close quarters, something very grimy and nasty. Like, it's not an epic battle. It's a straight up battle for survival.
Right, 100%. And I love it. Like, it has the moments of humor in there. Like, the poor mirror. Oh, great! They have a cave troll, and they have moments in there throughout the whole thing. And you have Gimli doing what he does. He's like so mourning his cousin's death and the death of his people in there. But I love that. I love that line. Let him come. You'll find there's still one dwarf who draws breath. Great warrior moments. Great warrior moments.
And it's so good, and I just love it.
Oh, I love the whole fight sequence. It's so brilliantly done. You get the
fear and it leads to the. Oh yeah, I was gonna say it's the fear of all of it, and the way that like then they're running through the mines once they've kind of defeated the first wave, and you're in these like incredibly open halls and rooms, and they're being surrounded, and then like the Balrog appears, and Frodo says, "What is that?" And it's a beast from hell.
Even before that, like, you see the fire, you hear the boots, and all of a sudden all the goblins are like, "I'm gone. I'm out of here." And like at first, like Kim was like, "Oh, they're all leaving. All right." But then really, in your heart, as a horror fan, you're like, "That ain't a good sign. That's not a good sign.
That's a bad thing.
That's a bad thing.
That's a bad thing."
And you're right. They're coming like, "What is that?"
It's just so good.
I love the Gandalf line. The Gandalf line comes in there. He's just there. Now we've established that Gandalf's pretty much a badass throughout this entire thing already. He's got those moments, and he sits there for a moment and just goes, "You're not going to really hit this. Run!" Just no fight, no plan. We're just going to run.
Well, and he even says something about like none of what any of you can do. Like, this is my paraphrase version, but he's like, none of your might would ever stand up to this. Essentially,
swords will do nothing here at some point.
Yeah, like none of your guys' strength will matter in this moment, and it's so funny because from here on, this movie, from this whole like cave troll sequence on, becomes almost like a rocket, because the next hour is basically just running, gunning action.
Right. I mean, I do have the moments in Lothlorien itself. There's another little respite, but even then, it's tense moments in Lothlorien. It's never really relaxed moments.
It's very small. There's nothing relaxing about the rest of the movie, because Gandalf dies here, obviously,
Spoilers!
If you've never seen it. I know, my God. But Gandalf delivers the, you shall not pass.
Right.
Yeah, and then the fly, you fools.
Fly, you fools.
Frodo screaming out because he wants to protect him, and he can't, and it's, it's really heartbreaking, but it's a beautiful moment because it adds stakes to a movie that you didn't really go into this knowing if that would happen or not.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, again, Lord of the Rings is very popular, but I would say that more people discovered Lord of the Rings because of the movies than had probably read the books at the time.
I get that.
So going into that, you don't know that Gandalf gets killed.
I mean, a discerning film watcher would probably go, okay, older, magical, like, mentor-type character. He's probably going to have to go at some point. But it happens pretty early on in the saga. You're still kind of like, oh, really? Okay. All right, let's see. Because there's 3 movies coming.
Yeah, I mean, a discerning film watcher maybe. But I'm talking about, like, the general audience, especially, like, kids and stuff who are seeing this for the first time. They don't know any better. Right. And so it's tragic, and the Balrog still looks remarkable. Just some really incredible CGI work.
Speaking of callbacks, man, I want to twinge back just for 1 second while they're running through the thing. There's a great callback prepared when the stone stairs are being knocked down. They have to jump down at one point, and Aragorn throws the hobbits over, goes to throw Gimli over. Nobody throws a dwarf. He tries to jump, doesn't quite make it, has to get hit with the beard. It's a great setup for the next film, which we'll get to. I just want to throw it there now so when we get to the 2 towers we get there. Anyway, going back to Balrog, looks great.
It's incredible, and I love that you pointed that out, by the way, because it is something that plays later, which I love. Toss me.
Toss me.
What? Toss me.
I gotta mention that. You have to toss me. Don't tell the elf. Don't tell the elf.
So good. I can't wait to watch 2 towers again.
God, that's so good.
It's so good, but I really love what they're going for with this one in particular, and just it's just about everything about this. Just from here on is really great, and I really get lost in the making of this movie in its world once we get to the Mines of Moria stuff, because something about it, like we do see Isengard once at one point,
right?
Where we see the birth of some of the Uruk-hai and things like that, but you never really feel the weight of the world in the way that I do once you're inside Moria's mines, because the way that it's shot and the way it looks, it just feels so remarkable, and it feels so large, and it's the first time, like, outside of them traveling, everything feels this, like, epic in scale. You know what I'm saying? Like,
100%.
We've seen Rivendell, we've seen some of this stuff, but we're seeing these, like, there's something about creepy caverns that are like so large that you look down and you don't know if there's ground.
Right, 100%. It's
that
so
just
epic.
like it's so haunting. Yeah, and it scares the shit out of me, and I get anxiety watching it in like the best way, because that's how I feel watching it. Is like, what the fuck? How on earth? You know what I mean? Like, it's just so good. They get out and they mourn Gandalf, but realize that they must keep going.
I will say that's actually another one of my favorite moments. It shows everything about everybody. It has the hobbits who were the first time, and hobbits and Legolas, I would say, because I feel like that's the first time they're really confronting death in a way, like that,
Yes.
And they can't quite handle it. You got Boromir, give him a moment for pity's sake, and you got Aragorn, who's kind of like, no, like, yeah, I know you're sad, but we have to get out of here because they're coming. More are coming. We have to take care of that before we can mourn. And I think Gimli feels the same way in a way too. You got to get going. But it is a great moment. Then we have to move on to Lothlorien.
And Sean Bean, man, like, we really haven't talked about him a ton in this. Like, Sean Bean really sells the role of Boromir because, again, it's the duality of man that you're seeing in him that I just find so utterly fascinating.
I love that.
And
You said it best, the duality of man, because he's so tempted. He falls to his temptations later on. We're going to talk about how he falls to his temptations. His, like, again, spoiler alert, death. His death scene is one of my top 5 film deaths, like, all time. At least
I mean, mix that with the score and the way it's
so
shot.
Powerful. It's a moment of redemption. It's so everything. And yes, Ben Bateman listens. If Ben Bateman are listening to this in order to get Schmodown tips again, Ben Bateman knows, because this is what he talks about this all the time as well. It's one of his favorite moments in the film as well. He loves the Boromir character for this reason. I love the fact that it shows everything about it. Because we see this really depiction from where he starts in Rivendell, where he's this great human hero, the greatest human hero of that time. And then he gets into the more of the, you see him tempted along the way. You see him tempted again. You see in Lothlorien, we're about to say that even Galadriel can see his problems, and she shows him his problems, like the mirror to his heart and his soul, and he can't take it. He's like broken down about it. He's like, so he did. And what happens? He does fall. He does fall. Just enough to tweak everything.
It's just so good. It's just, it's an incredible performance. It's an incredible sequence. We're really kind of barreling towards that sequence, to be honest.
I know. I stopped because I didn't want to talk about it because we got really just have Lothlorien left and then the ending sequence, which that's a major part of. So I don't want to skip over Lothlorien because there's some great moments in there as well.
Look, I'm just saying.
The first moment where we talked about the dwarf, the first moment there we talked about like Gimli and his whole like thing with Haldir. We already talked about that. But let's talk about Galadriel and her husband and the whole of Lothlorien. It's a great scene. And Cate Blanchett, I remember, it's funny to me, and I don't know why. I guess it's the way that there is sexism in this world, especially when it comes to actresses of a certain type or whatever. A lot of people gave Cate Blanchett some shit. Or not even her some shit, but gave the casting of her some shit. Like, Galadriel's supposed to be the most beautiful woman of all time, and Cate Blanchett's kind of an average-looking female. I remember hearing, I'm going,
how dare anyone say that?
What are you fucking talking about? First of all, yeah, shut your fucking mouth. Like, and secondly, like, I would prefer, like, how am I going to say this? I would prefer Cate Blanchett acting over any, like, supermodel kind of whatever. Because Cate Blanchett feels right. She feels like the Lady Galadriel. She delivers the speeches like nobody else could. I love Cate Blanchett as an actress, and 10 times over 10, I'm thinking Cate Blanchett. And I'll throw out there too, Cate Blanchett's a beautiful woman. She's, I mean, like, I don't know what these people.
Anyone saying otherwise is full of shit. Like
I
just
agree.
straight up, she's gorgeous.
She is.
And honestly, this is one of those things about fans that needs to stop being a thing. Just because they don't look exactly like you fucking see things in your mind doesn't make it bad.
100%.
Performance is way more important.
Absolutely.
Performance is way more important than how much someone looks like a character. Like Daniel Craig as Bond doesn't really look anything like the book character. Guess what? He's the best actor to play that role.
Absolutely. I know that Lucy Lawless was considered for Galadriel, and I'm going to say it now. I love Lucy Lawless, but there's no way she would have done even like a quarter of the job that Kate Blanchett did.
I don't disagree with that, although I love Lucy Lawless. So
I do.
I would have
Lucy
been down to
Lawless.
see it.
I mean,
I would have been down to see it.
don't get me wrong. I'm sure it would have been a good performance and everything else. I mean, that's me also betraying. Kate Blanchett is one of my favorite actresses, like hands down. So I could see her in anything. Every time she's in a movie, I'm happy because I like seeing her.
Yeah.
And in
I mean,
fact,
that makes two of us. I feel the same way.
her big moment in this film for me, besides the prologue, is that great moment. It's a very poetry and rhymes to the Gandalf sequence in Bag's End, where Frodo offers her the ring after seeing what's going to happen if he fucks up. And she gives Frodo no quarter there. He basically says, "Yeah, you got to do this or else the world's ending. No pressure, but you got to do this or the world's ending." It shows him what's like the Shire burning and everything else. So he offers her the ring, and she's like, gets that moment in her eyes, like, "You're gonna give it to me freely." And she starts like going in there, have this whole big temptation moment. I would be a queen. I would be dark, but terrible as the dawn. It's like this weird contradiction of stuff, but it made so much sense that she could not take it because it would end up being bad for Middle Earth. And she stops and says, "Nope, I'm not going to do it." And it's this great. I love the line too. It's like, I passed.
She even says I passed the trial or whatever it is. Like she knows. And it's, again, talk about a horror sequence. It's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And again, it just shows like how frequently the ring affects people around it, because we saw Bilbo, we see Boromir, we see her, like we see Elrond going, "Get that thing out of here." Mm-hmm. I'm not tempted by it. Just get it out of here. It's evil.
Right. So good. Oh man, I love it. But again, Galadriel also does inform Frodo that someone who will try to take the ring. So it leads up to that moment where we actually see that happen. They make it to the Gap of Rohan. First of all, I got to turn back. This is one of Gimli's moments to me. Gimli, who has hated the elves, completely hates the elves, is completely enamored. He says he's not going to get snared by a Galadriel, whatever. But after the end of the time, he doesn't want anything from her except for a lock of hair, and she gives him 3. And it's this great like moment, and like you see Legolas just kind of like smile at it, like. And it's not so like good. It's not a condescending smile. It's not like a "ha ha, I told you" smile, but it's kind of like a smile of like friendship, like he gets my people now. And there's that moment that you kind of see, like, even though they're going to bicker, they're always going to bicker. You can see that friendship blossom, which eventually becomes one of the greatest friendships in the saga by the time Return of the King ends. It's great. It's so good.
I think, again, I mean, look, we could wax poetic about it all day, but like the character relationships in these movies fucking matter. Like I keep bringing it up for that reason, and you're right. Like it's a great character beat for characters who get very close together by the time it's over.
Absolutely.
And it matters.
Now, I have one thing I brought up yesterday. I was watching it, and I asked Kim this too. And I don't understand exactly what happened. It didn't make sense to me. They travel down by the river, and they pass through the big kings, and Aragorn says, "Oh, I always want to see my ancestors." Now, they go ashore, and after the whole battle sequence, which we'll talk about in a minute, they end up, in order to go out alone, Frodo takes one of the boats and crosses the river. If that's the way they had to go, why did they just bank on that side to begin with?
That's a very good question that I never thought about until this moment.
Right? Like, it doesn't make, like, why are they going to bank this way, go do their thing, and go, "Oh, we're going to go, so we got to go cross the river here." Like, just bank over there. And then not have to worry about it.
Yeah, but then we don't get a cool battle sequence.
And we don't get Sam trying to drown himself. That's part of it, I guess. I'll let it go. Every moment has some flaws. It's just something that I kind of like, why did that happen? And Kim said, "I don't know." So, you listeners, reach out to me. If you have a theory, let me know, because I'm kind of curious.
The theory was to drive PLD insane now, thinking about it.
winner, and it worked just enough. Long term. I've watched these movies for 20 years. I've just now thought about that. So I'm a little slow at times. But either way, okay. So we bank, and we get to the moment where the Fellowship is in there, and they start talking about what they have to do, where they have to go with Mordor. And I love the line, and Gimli starts going, "Oh, that's it, huh? We also have to do this. We also have to do that. We also have to do this. I also have to do that." And Aragorn's like, "Well, you better buck up or shut up," basically. And he gets all like, "What?" He gets so offended. I love it. It's so dwarven. I'm not scared. I'm just saying. But
yep. This whole sequence is so great, though, man. Again, because you get the duality of man, and this 100%. Is important.
Back because to back,
this is where
man.
Yeah, the most important being obviously is Boromir.
Right.
Boromir fully turns on Frodo to take the ring and scares him away after trying to attack him and steal the ring. Frodo runs and Viggo finds him. And Aragorn is, going, "Calm down. Look, I'm here to protect you." And he goes, "Yeah, but I thought Boromir was too." And look what you just did. And
I don't want to step on you, but one of the best parts of the duality of man is so Boromir takes him down. Frodo has to escape, put the ring on, and leaves him. And Boromir automatically, just such as quickly, realizes what he did, is upset about it. Like, I can't believe it. What just happened? Oh my god! But then he sees Frodo sees Aragorn, and Aragorn goes, "Boromir, where's the ring?" And Frodo thinks that Aragorn is going for the ring. And he actually feels like, I just saw Boromir do it. Oh my god, Aragorn's doing it too. Holy shit. And then all of a sudden, he's like, "No, stop, get back. And Aragorn's like, "Wait, what are you?" And he kind of realizes what happened and what Frodo fears out of him. And it's the very fear that Aragorn himself had. Aragorn was very fearful of falling just like Isildur did. That's his whole reason why he wouldn't be king before, because he wouldn't do it. He gets that moment, he sees the ring, and he understands like no other leader will. Closes Frodo's hand around the ring and said, "I would have gone with you to the end, but I understand exactly what you have to do." And it's this moment of pure, like, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. It shows why Aragorn is the king. He understands that Frodo needs to go off on his own. That's his destiny, and he would.
Well, and not just that. It's that moment when he looks down and he sees Aragorn grabbing his sword, and he starts to panic, and then Aragorn goes, "Run." And he looks down and he sees his sword glowing blue, and he realizes the only reason that he was pulling the sword out was to protect him.
Right.
And it's such a great moment. Yeah.
And to talk about badass moments, Aragorn just turns around. He's all the oars coming, and he's kind of like, "Yep, let's go." It's so great. And of course, we have the moment we mentioned earlier about Merry and Pippin seeing Frodo trying to run off his own and trying to help him out. And then we see what we just were barreling towards, Boromir's redemption.
Yep.
Where Boromir knows, I can't help Frodo. I don't know what to do. I don't know where Frodo is. I can't. All I know, all these people are attacking, and I can't. I don't know what to do. How do I? The only thing I can do to redeem myself right now is to protect his friends. The halflings can't. And then I got to throw back. I'll actually even throw back real quickly. The thing we mentioned after the Fellowship was going, when the Fellowship first started off from Rivendell, there's that great sequence where Boromir is teaching Merry and Pippin like how to fight. Like they're having like little sword battles.
Yeah, which is great.
It's a great humorous moment between them. It's like, it's a great way to have the Fellowship together. I forgot to mention that. And now here it is. Those two are in danger, and he's going to do anything he can. He's going to protect them, and he protects them all the way to the end until the main Urukai guy hits him with an arrow, stops him, and he's going to go on for more. He has to get hit like 3 times with arrows before he can't fight anymore. And it's just a sad sequence.
Seeing that Urukai warrior the first time too is like actually really fucking terrifying. Because you never really seen them with all that face paint in that way until that moment. Like, he walks out there like a friggin' badass. And you're like, oh, dude, this guy's not fucking around. He's for real. Like, Jesus. It really points, or puts a perspective, rather, on what we're going to see later. Because you know that they're building out an army, which we learn in the next movie, obviously. Right. But they're going to be made up of dudes like this.
Yep. And I will say,
scary.
Lord of the Rings did it better than The Hobbit did, for example. The Hobbit created that like poor character that I could try to give it too much of a background. You didn't need enough of a background. You just need that this is the main bad guy. That was enough to know.
The Hobbit has a lot of little issues like that throughout,
right.
Just in general. I've felt that for a while, unfortunately. Yeah. Like,
right.
I like the movies, don't get me wrong. You brought it up earlier. I think you and I like them more than most people, but they definitely have some issues like that where it's like, maybe
you do that.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
subtlety.
The other problem is truth be told, is that he never should have been a CGI character. It should have just been a person in makeup. And the CGI of it all is... Yeah, I mean, that really... And if I remember correctly, from what I understand, it was originally supposed to just be makeup.
Yeah, well, I don't remember why they
done it after the fact.
Right.
Yeah, so... It's just a weird thing. But again, I think that this sequence is really great. It's really heartfelt because... Again, talk about throwing an audience that doesn't know the source material. The Boromir sequence, that's a big deal because Sean Bean's arguably maybe one of the most recognizable people in this cast.
Yeah. I mean, even though that's why
Game of Thrones did the same thing. Right, and Game of Thrones fucking did the same thing to him.
Yep.
Like, less than a decade later, they cast him for one season to kill him off.
To kill him off because he just does good death scenes, which is true, he does. But it's a great way.
I mean, he's well known for it.
We have the great sequence where, like I said, Boromir has redemption for his loss. But not only that, it aids in Aragorn's character development. It's not a meaningless death at all. Not only do you have the redemption of a character, you also have driving forward another character. Aragorn obviously saves him from the indignity of getting like sliced by the Uruk-hai. Aragorn kills the Uruk-hai, and Boromir still dies, but they have that moment where Boromir, despite all the differences that Aragorn has within himself and about men, Aragorn claimed at that point, I will do what you wanted me to do. You're dying, but I will take them to Gondor. I will basically bring on the King of Men. And it makes Boromir so happy. My captain, my king. This is what I needed to happen. And it's such a beautiful, tender moment, and it drives forward Aragorn's character. Aragorn becomes Aragorn here. He was pretty much Strider the whole time. He was called Aragorn, and we knew his name was Aragorn. But in reality, he was the ranger who was hiding out and just doing his job. This moment, he is claiming the title of Aragorn. And it's so noble, powerful, so great. I love it so much. It's so beautiful.
Well, and I mean, again, we kind of really glossed over this, but like, there's the whole realization earlier in the Fellowship sequence when Boromir even realizes who he is.
Right.
You know, oh my God, wait.
This is this guy?
He's him. He's the heir of Isildur. Like, he's the true king. Like, and so that's what makes the moments in the end of it so good, because again, he proves why he is the king.
Absolutely. And it works so well. Again, everything is done for a reason in these films, and a lot of times it's for multiple reasons, and it ends up serving multiple situations. And God, it's so good. I love this movie. That's all I keep saying. I don't know how much time we're going to go back. That's a drinking game for you guys. How many times we just say, "Oh God, this was so good."
I mean, that's kind of my thing with the whole. Like I said earlier, like in hindsight, as I continue to revisit this one, it moves up as my favorite movie. I think because it feels so beautiful and just so moving. Like, look, there's a reason that this movie was picked by like the Library of Congress or whatever to be a protected film that like mattered to. This movie is really thrilling. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the next two too, but there's something about this one that continues to just really wow me every time I put it on, and it just feels so special in a way that, not to say the other two aren't, but like this movie feels like a change. Again, I think that's what I started with this. The whole thing was this movie felt like a sea change.
It did. It really did.
Something really special lives in this movie and continues to. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just really, really special. And I think that's why I fall in love with it more and more every single time that I watch it, because there's something truly, truly moving about it. And I think that even if you didn't watch 2 and 3, you can be satisfied on the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that really matters. It's not a great ending, but it's a satisfactory ending.
Yep, 100%. I will definitely agree with you on all aspects of that. I will say that I think I have more favorite moments in Two Towers Return of the King. Like I point out, if we're looking at like top moments of the franchise, more than will fall in Two Towers and Return of the King. I think this is the most consistently good film of the three.
I could not agree more. I think it's just something about it. And I think it's always like the start of a journey movie too, though. Mm-hmm. Like in a bigger series like this, Star Wars is really similar. Like we all talk about A New Hope, and like everyone talks about Empire and how great it is, but like, dude, go back and rewatch A New Hope. Mm-hmm. Like it's really fucking special. And I'm not saying people say it's not, but it's the groundwork, right? It's the one that you lead off with. It's the Sorcerer's Stone. The Sorcerer's Stone is like arguably one of the best movies in that franchise, just for what it does for Harry Potter. It makes you feel that world, man.
I will say any time that a first film in a franchise isn't the most favorite or famous, whatever the other film is in that franchise that you like more for whatever reason, I can guarantee you it's because of the groundwork put in by the first one or two, whatever. 100%. Empire, the Two Towers, Return of the King, Endgame. You could not have Endgame without the 10 years of groundwork laid by the MCU. Would have no effect comparatively.
I mean, that's 100% Infinity War.
Infinity War, same thing. Exactly. 100%.
Same thing. Like, all these movies, they need the build. They need...
No Way Home.
No Way Home. Like, I think you need all of it. All of it when it comes to No Way Home. Even the bad.
And bring it full circle. Top Gun Maverick wouldn't be as good without having had Top Gun.
Right. And I think that sometimes we need to put respect on the original movies. I think people get lost in this idea that the sequels are always superior. And it's like, yeah, but like The Dark Knight's great. But have you seen Batman Begins?
I love Batman Begins.
Right. And that's my point. Like, everyone forgets that, like, yeah, The Dark Knight's great. Have you seen Batman Begins? A movie that was so good and underperformed that WB went, look, we like the direction it went. We'll let you do another one.
Absolutely, 100%. Well,
so basically what I'm saying is Fellowship of the Ring fucking rules.
It does.
And I hope that all of you have enjoyed our TED Talk.
Thank you, Brandon Buckingham, for giving us this motivation to give me actually more of an excuse to watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy again.
Yeah, I was going to say it's more of an excuse.
But it's a good excuse to do so. But he actually did. He is one of our patrons, and he did suggest that. That's here where you can suggest. You, too, if you want to join patreon.com/PLD Project, you, too, could also suggest a film franchise that we will go over.
Join our movie cult.
Join the movie cult. We have another one coming up. I know Danielle Ramirez, another patron I want to shout out, wants us to do the Jurassic franchise, which I wish we could have done now because I did just do a rewatch for Dominion. But I do have we do have some other stuff we have to take care of first. So we will, Danielle. I think the first franchise we will do after Halloween will be the Jurassic franchise for Danielle. And then after that, throw them out there. We need help choosing these franchises that we want to do.
Yeah, because otherwise you're just going to get me being like, PLD, I want to do the Universal Monsters again. And he's going to be like, PJ, shut up. And I'm going to be like, yeah, but I want to do the Universal Monsters
again. And we're going to do Friday the 13th. We're going to do Nightmare on Elm Street. We're going to do all these horror movies because that's what we end up doing. So if you want a non-horror franchise, you probably should let us know too, because our default will probably go to horror franchises because that's just how we roll.
I do want to do Indiana Jones, though.
I do want to do Rocky. Yeah. We will do both those. So we're going to do all sorts of movies. I'd love talking movies with you. So I mean, like that. No, that's just going to. I'm being completely 100% honest. I might let you drown in the river, but I do love talking movies with you. So
all right, fine. I'll take the goddamn compliment, you asshole.
But if you want to join Patreon.com. We actually just had a great hangout last night with our patrons. With great 2 hours. We talked about all sorts of things. We got visited from the crew that went to Orlando, our friends that went to Orlando, talking about robots and talking about cars.
You mean our friends who didn't even invite us?
Those fucking friends, yeah, seriously. What the
hell? And then the response was, hey, don't worry. There's always an open invite. Yeah, but I can't know about an open invite if no one tells me what's happening. Just throwing that out there next time. Florida friends, quote unquote.
Yeah. Spike
I would have
Meekin.
written E.T. 40 times.
He took this very to heart. He takes this very personally. But
I mean,
let me
look,
shout out my patrons. Go ahead.
wait. We haven't even done our thing yet, though. We didn't rate the movie.
Oh shit, man! It's been a while. You're right.
I thought you were winding all this up to be like, all right, and now let's like rate the movie, and then you shout out the patrons. But then I was like, oh no, you just forgot.
I am totally forgetting about not rating the movie. I actually didn't set up any of my spreadsheets to do anything. You threw me because PJ, we said he's going to the Mondo movies tonight. I completely forgot that we were going to do this podcast early. I was expecting to do this much later on tonight. I was ready to prepare, so I was not prepared. I kind of had to do this really quickly. Go, okay, 15 minutes, let's do it. So I was not prepared. It's better.
That was my bad. I apologize.
It's okay. But I should know, because you know what? It is actually my bad, because we did mention it before. I just completely forgot we were doing it that way. So I had to do a new...
Did we actually? I actually don't even remember if we brought up that we do, in fact, rate things here.
Let's see. All right. Well, we're only doing the trilogy. I'm going to keep this open because we will eventually go to do the Hobbit as well.
Hobbit,
but
please.
I will do, first of all, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. Go ahead. While I'm setting us up, why don't you tell me your rating of this film? Of course, from 0 to 11, because we always go to 11 in the PLD Project's universe, so to speak. So what do you give it?
12.
12. Okay, I'm going to write it in as an 11 because we only go to 11, but I'll say I understand where you're going.
No, once again, 12.
That perfect, huh?
I'm telling you right now, 12.
I'm going to give it a 13.
Oh my god, you fucking asshole. You just had to do that because you're trying to make me look bad. I didn't go far enough.
You didn't go far enough, PJ.
Wow.
How dare you, my friend? How dare you? No, you're right, though.
Well,
they are perfect. You'll give it a level. You'll give it a full 11 on the 11 scale because you can't go any higher. And there's no doubts in my mind that it's an 11. It's so good. So good.
Can I say spoiler alert? I'm pretty sure all three of these end up in the exact same.
I think we're going to have our second franchise, our first absolutely perfect franchise that there is. Because, yes, I think they are all 11s as well. I can't see watching the Two Towers and going, yeah, no, 10.5. No, it's going to be a fucking 11. They're all going to be 11s. That might even be why subconsciously I decided not to rate them, because it's like, why are we even bothering? They're all 11s.
That's probably true. I bet you right now, like, Bateman's listening to this and going, these fucking guys, calling these perfect movies. They come on, you guys. There's no, it's a perfect movie. It's a perfect movie.
I only watched the Boromir death. It is a perfect movie.
Yeah. Maybe if you got past the Boromir death, we can talk.
There's something after Boromir does?
Or before? What? Who is Boromir again? Is that Sean Bean? Oh. All right, cool.
Anyway.
Oh, you know what?
Guys.
And also, happy birthday to Malcolm McDowell.
Oh, there you go.
Today's his birthday. I just learned that as I was sitting here talking to you.
Wow.
He was born this day in 1943. We do like Malcolm McDowell. He's not in these movies, but he probably should have been.
He could have been. He definitely could have been. He would have been great in that. Someone
he worked with is in these movies.
Who? Go ahead. Throw it out there.
I mean, should I spoil this right now? Because I mean, I could. I'm going to. It's Brad Dourif. Brad Dourif's in these movies.
Brad Dourif is in these movies.
Yeah. Brad Dourif, who is also in Halloween and Halloween 2, directed by Rob Zombie.
Brad Dourif, one of my favorite character actors of all time. All right, guys. Well, I will list off our patrons now that I have to do. Shout out specifically Danielle Ramirez, Brandon Buckingham, Brady Parker, Jeff Alterman, John Lestrina, Kelly W. All of which we saw in our chat last night.
No, we don't talk about them.
we don't talk about them. I talk about them.
Well, Danny, I don't talk about. Danny's one of the
you want the Orlando crew?
Mean people.
The mean people from Orlando. That's fair. But we love you guys so much. I appreciate you guys, of course. You can also, if you're on our Patreon, you get to see more of PJ and me doing a PLD Product Presents Two Mediocre White Idiots in a Box. I know, it's a blue box.
Okay.
In a blue box.
It's a blue box. I didn't correct you this time. You corrected yourself. You knew I was going to say it, so I'm proud of you.
I did. I jumped the gun there to make sure. But we do once a month get a Patreon special exclusive video where we talk about Doctor Who. We already had mentioned we did the Eighth Doctor's entire visual oeuvre. Last month we did Waters of Mars, and next month, we're going to be doing Blink, one of the famous Doctor Who episodes. I'm so excited about that too. That's going to be fun. That's going to be a lot of fun.
You guys know I like my spooky stuff, so I had to go with one of the spookiest.
One of the spookiest, definitely. Had a Dr. Light episode to boot. But regardless, we got that. Next week, I think we're going to hopefully get this on track. And next week, we'll do the Two Towers extended edition for that. Another great number, probably 11 out of 11 again. Of course, you can also join me listening to Crown Jewels. I do my Queen podcast, about to finish the first album, eventually going through all the songs that are on the album and also the sessions that we know about, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, every Tuesday, Class Action with Richard Eric Jarvie and Matty Gunner. This week, we're actually doing Jurassic Park trilogy versus the Jurassic World trilogy. We're going to see which one comes out ahead of the game in this one. I'm not sure. I don't have a snap judgment on this one yet. I'll have to see. Probably for me,
I know what
I think Jurassic Park is the greatest movie in the franchise, and then Lost World Jurassic Park is the worst film in the franchise. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see.
Oh, I would be remiss, by the way. We need to shout out one more person who's not a patron, but yelled at me because we did not have this person on our Lord of the Rings podcast.
Oh, is that true?
This is for Kiwi Jess. She's very upset that we were talking about things shot in New Zealand, and she was not invited. I forgot to bring that up earlier.
Her invite was lost in the mail. That's what it was. I mean, she definitely was invited. Yeah, something like that. So.
I think the Kiwis ate it.
The Kiwis definitely ate it. That's what happened. Well, thank you, Kiwi. Next time, maybe.
Anyway, that was Jess. That's for you. Sorry, your invite got lost in the mail. There's still 2 more on the way. I think allegedly
2 more chances for mail, I guess, to get lost. But we love you anyway. All right, guys. Thanks so much again for popping by. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. I know this is an extended episode. It's for an extended edition. We will see you next time. Until then, stay mediocre, everybody.
Stay mediocre. Don't do anything else. Just be as mediocre as possible.
Awesome. Absolutely never underestimate the power of mediocrity. Until next time, guys.
Bye-bye.